Welcome everyone to Jurassic Party, the Jurassic Park 1 through 4 Dinosaur Crew reunion. It's going to be an amazing night. Now, I know we promised you guys that a lot of the artists and mechanics from all those films are going to be here. Like as promised, the artists and mechanics and geniuses behind those films are here with us, and we are going to have a tremendous night. I'm going to quickly walk you through the order of events. Right now is a welcome, and starting at 6 o'clock, we're going to talk about Jurassic Park. And we're roughly going to cover each film in chronological order throughout the night. So 6 o'clock Jurassic, 7 o'clock The Lost World, 8 o'clock Jurassic Park 3, and then close the night with Jurassic World. Things might go shorter, things might go longer. We don't know what these artists are going to share with us, so it's going to be loose. We're going to try and keep it organized, but it's really about having fun, so we'll see what happens. Take a moment now. If you have a specific question about a Jurassic Park film, specifically the dinosaurs, the live-action dinosaurs, take a moment now to write your question in the comments, right there next to the video. And do us a favor, because we have David Sanger moderating, and he's going to be scanning. Put the name of the film, so JP1, JP2, JP3, JW, and then the dinosaur that your comment is about. That is going to help David organize things. We'll try to get to a lot of your questions tonight, but with all of you watching, there's no way we can get to all of them. So do us a favor and label your question. So now, people are going to come in. We got about 15 minutes until we bring our Jurassic Park veterans in. So start writing your questions. We're going to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to start trickling in the dinosaur crew from Jurassic Park. Thank you for being here.
Hi, this is Andy Schoenberg for the Stan Winston School, and you are looking at a tape of the videotape of the Brachiosaur rehearsals in the shop at Stan's before the Brach was packed up and taken down to stage 28 at Universal. You can see the mouth movement. It's a 7.5-foot tall puppet. It included the head, of course, and part of the neck, and it extended down maybe another foot or so below what you see there. It's the jaw is a 4-axis jaw, so it has up and down movement and side to side. The reasoning behind that was Stan wanted the Brach to appear to be as docile as possible. So one of the things that a 4-axis jaw gives you is that sort of orbital movement of the lower jaw grinding side to side, which is reminiscent of a cow chewing its cud. We thought, well, that certainly can't be bad. So here's a little further test. You can see we grabbed some vines from out on front of the building and put them in the Brach's mouth. At this point, the tongue is moving also, and the lips are moving a little too much, but that's something that you learn as you go. So it's a matter of a number of people coordinating. I think there were 6 of us all together puppeteering on the Brach. There was someone on the eyes, someone on the tongue. I was on the jaw movement. There's someone on the lips, and then the big move was the neck movement. There was head movement, but then there was also neck movement where the whole thing could pitch forward and back. And the whole thing was the largest puppet we built that had absolutely no hydraulics in it. So it was weighty and a big challenge to get to move. I got quite a workout on the jaw, doing a big sort of circular motion with this giant controller, getting everything moving and grinding properly. Not too bad.
Hi, my name is Rick Gallatin, and I was the lead mechanical designer for the Spitter on Jurassic Park at Stan Winston Studios. And there's some of the artwork from Crash McCreary. He's an amazing illustrator and really allowed us to get a feel for what the character was going to be and gave us a lot of inspiration. And he is a truly phenomenal artist. Here we are hamming it up, trying to figure out the frill of the Spitter. And here's a outline of the Spitter next to a raptor. Here's a maquette of a raptor going through some hop motions to get an idea for what the spitter's gait would look like. We ended up modeling it after an ostrich. Used real footage from a documentary on ostrich movements. We analyzed that frame by frame, came up with this cam-driven mechanism so that the legs would follow the same motion of an ostrich gait. And then we changed to this one where we had a stick coming out of the foot. We were going to be below the floor, and the person who would step and walk, give the character its normal massive gait, would then also control the legs, and the feet would land on the floor. There was a channel on the floor that the person would walk underneath. The legs would land on the floor along with you, and you could go left or right leg as you needed to make it look like it was walking. This was a little free animation of the hip, knee, and ankle just from the stick on the bottom there. On the stick, there was a controller that allowed you to control the toes. Here's the first prototype of the neck. All I had was a T-Rex skull from something we threw on there to give it an idea that there was a head on the end of this neck mechanism. And in this case, all three joints of the neck, the left and right joints were all tied together. The up-downs were all tied together. So it could only do simple up-down movements, simple left-right movements. And in the final version, all three of these stages were totally independent. So it could do an S-curve at the neck going left and right. Sprung load to take the weight of the head. So each of those three segments, those parallelograms, were sprung differently. The further you got out, the lighter the load got on it. So the springs would get progressively heavier from the head back towards the body. And that would make the whole character kind of float, even without controllers on it. Give it a really lifelike, natural flexibility and movement. And here's a skin test of the neck. This is a thick, 1 inch or so thick skin on the neck to smooth out those three aluminum neck sections you just saw. This is a test of a paintball mechanism we used to get the spitter to actually spit its venom out at Nedry. That's our target there. I believe it was methicillin KY jelly with some food coloring mixed in, and he would actually spit from the mouth of the dinosaur. It wasn't a trick. Here at the Stan Winston Studios, there was no moisture in the air to speak of, and so compressed air shooting out of the mouth looked like nothing. It was invisible. Looked great. But when we got on a stage and there's rain and water everywhere, high humidity, as the compressed air came out, it became a cloud, and that gave away the gags. This is a skinny version of me playing with a frill mechanism. It's a sheet of latex rubber glued onto some support rods that were all hooked to a pulley, and as we activated them, they would swing forward and then rotate out to open the frill up, as well as come forward off the neck. So it had to flare out and flare forward at the same time. Here's the tongue mechanism. This is one of the coolest tongues I've ever done. It's a 2-stage tentacle mechanism, and the third section was the base of it, which would also rotate up and down. So the tongues would go left and right, up and down, each section of the tongue. And then underneath are those two giant holes, which led to tubing running down through the neck of the creature. And that's where we pumped the high-pressure air, which would spit out of its mouth. Here we're practicing some real discrete moves. It's important to fine-tune the performance and not just move back and forth really quickly to see that it can actually move, but to follow a character around, to make eye contact with somebody, to size them up. It needs a little work, but it shows a lot of promise. I remember when we finished Batman Returns, we sat in a room. They called us in because we knew we had Jurassic Park, and all the mechanics came in to be assigned characters, and they said, okay, well, who's read the book? And we all pretty much had. Well, who wants to work on the T-Rex? And a bunch of people raised their hands, and they wrote their names down. Who wants to work on the Triceratops? People raised their hands. Who wants to work on the spitter? Well, I had just been in this industry maybe a year, very green, very naive to a lot of the techniques we'll be using, and I raised my hand thinking I was going to be the assistant mechanic to Richard Landon or one of the guys who had been there for a long time. Well, I was the only person who raised my hand, so they wrote my name down, and that was it. That was how quickly the decisions were made that this is your character, you're fully responsible for it, go ahead and build it. And I kept quiet, and I was scared to death, but I didn't know how much I had bitten off here. And if they knew how little I knew, they would never have given me the assignment. But turned out well. I was a fast learner, watched the other guys build things and took cues from them, and it turned out great. So we're doing some tests for Stan and Spielberg here, and we're running it through its paces. So at this point, the spitter was about 80% finished. Here we have a more of a test of Shane carrying the weight of the creature, or a lot of him, without his skin on it. Shane Mahan in the front, I'm in the back, and to my left is Patrick Shern. We're all operating this character to give him some motion to see what problems we're going to run into when it wants to tip Shane over. Same rig with the skin on it. Mark Duranko in the back helping out. Shane's putting on the rig. I'm in the red sweatshirt, and Rich Hogan is there helping us lift. So we're going to see what kind of issues we have with momentum and inertia as the creature tries to walk. The bundle of cables coming out of his back go to controllers, and those have to travel with the spitter as he walks across the scene. Here's a demonstration of the leg mechanisms. A lot of free movement in the hip, knee, ankle. Shane's demonstrating with the handles on the bottom so he can make the left and right legs move as he wants to while he actually takes a step with his body. The spitter has the same gait as the puppeteer below. And as you can see, as the mass of the spitter moves left and right, kind of torques the puppeteer down below a little bit. Here's the trench and the floor of the set for the spitter. And you can see the floor down below. Alan Scott's working on the knee. This was the path the spitter would take approaching Nedry on the hill. And Shane would walk underneath the set supporting the creature, and then the rest of us would be upstairs operating the hands and the tail and the head movements. This was the wettest set we've ever been on. We had downpour of rain constantly, water coming down the hill, and it was going under the set, and it was supposed to drain to the LA River. Well, it had flooded and caused a lot of problems. The spitter was my favorite character to date. Working on Jurassic Park at Stan Winston Studios was an experience of a lifetime. I couldn't have gotten a luckier break. The film was fantastic, the people we worked with were great, and this is one of those films that will last forever. Once again, this is Rick Gallinson. I hope you've enjoyed this exclusive look behind the scenes.
Hey everybody, we are back. Welcome to Jurassic Party, the Dinosaur Crew reunion. We are going to talk about Jurassic Park for the next hour, guys. And I am joined by many of the artists and mechanics. Well, how many? Not that many, but there's a bunch in here from the film. And we're going to talk about herbivores for this first 20 minutes. Before we jump in, I want to say a quick thank you to Beth Hathaway. 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call from Beth Hathaway saying, I was talking to Dave Grasso, and we were saying, wouldn't it be cool to do like a panel about Jurassic Park in the fall in Monsterpalooza? And I said, yeah, it's a great idea, but we should do it in 2 weeks and have it be hundreds of people. And you started this. So,
I'm sorry.
so thank you, Beth. And you're going to kind of co-host with me when I get tired of talking.
I'll do my best.
All right, so that's Beth. Before we talk about him, let's go around the horn and introduce ourselves. Why don't we start with John Rosengrant over here? Just say your name and your role on the film.
John Rosengrant, chief cook and bottle washer.
Your burritos were amazing. Crash McCreary, designer and sous chef.
Dave Grasso, artist. That's all I do.
Paul Mejias, sculptor and sundry assignments.
Home renovator,
Home renovator.
endlessly. Beth, you're up.
Beth Hathaway, art department.
Mark Duranko, painter and occasional class clown.
Matt Winston, puppeteer on JP.
I'm John Daw, otherwise known as JD. Mechanical, made all the eyes for the dinosaurs.
And I'm Andy Schoenberg, artist and dishwasher.
And fine artist.
And fine
Wow,
artist.
his Mona Lisa is gorgeous. Well, guys, we're going to start out with herbivores. We're going to talk about the brachiosaur. Who wants to sort of pick up the ball? I guess design is a good place to start, Crash. What, any memories of sort of the development of where it all started with that character?
Memories. Wow.
Oh no, you didn't bring your reminder?
Memories. Yeah. Good at memories. I remember the Brachy was kind of. I'd been doing some designs prior to that and kind of started to find a feel for skin textures, muscle tone, weight. It was really important that these felt very real world. It wasn't a creature movie. It was, bringing dinosaurs really to life. And that's what excited us so much about the book, because it has so much real world kind of aspects about it. So, it was real important to make them feel like they were animals that lived, that you believe. When you see them, you believe that they're real. I think that's even a passage in the book where to say, as soon as I saw it, even though it was a dinosaur, I just believed that it existed and it made sense. So a big part of the design was making everything feel like it made sense, using known textures like elephant, large animal textures for the skin. Again, putting character in the eyes was really important. Because he had a big
thing from Steven Spielberg, to make sure that these things did seem real. And he was talking about in one of the early meetings, when you got to think about this, what the sounds they would make, how they would smell, how usually when they moved, how the ground would move. So it's all these kind of things that I know Crash was weaving, and that we were all starting to live in that world.
Smell was the hardest thing.
Smell. Yeah. Well, I remember my dad had a bunch of poop delivered to the shop to get you in that
if you scratch
dino.
the drawings, you can actually smell it.
Now,
That was the first use of scratching
Exactly.
design. Yeah.
So then after it was approved on.
Yes, back in the 90s.
So there was a great, throughout all these films, there was a great handoff. There would obviously be the discussions, then the concept art, and then the design process would continue in the maquette phase. And I know, Andy, you were instrumental on sculpting the Brack maquette.
There were two maquettes for the Brack. There was one that was 29 inches tall. That was the full Brack that I sculpted first, and then there was one section that was just from the shoulders to the head that was 5'2". Sculpted both of those, and then worked on the full-size one as well, the 7.5 foot tall.
And would Crash come out sometimes and go, I didn't draw it like that!
Well, there was a thing that
Drake, you
happened
didn't.
where on the 5 foot one, where Stan was trying to communicate what he wanted, and it was sort of, there was a lot of back and forth on the design at that point, and I remember Crash coming out and photographing the maquette at that
And I
point.
just traced over it.
And then,
You're giving your secrets away. It's the Crash, the art of tracing.
but it was really helpful, to get.
Pencil, though. You can't do it with tracing.
But it was helpful to have that finished artwork come out of you, and to be able to just go, all right, fine, I'll just do that.
long-haired leaping gnome version of.
That's
There
right.
it is.
Wow.
Oh,
There he
That was
is.
my,
Wowie.
He was known for his locks back in the day.
beautiful days.
Gave him
Great
sculpting
man.
power.
Yeah, that's right. It's my Leon Russell look.
How about the rest of you? Who else touched the Brachiosaur before we move on to the Triceratops? And if we have any Brachiosaur questions, Dave?
Where are those maquettes now? Do any of them still exist?
Those maquettes, well, they went to ILM, I believe. Those small scale
A
ones.
couple of different
Copies.
sets. There were sets that went to Hasbro and to Aid with Toys. There was sets that went to ILM for the digital work that they ended up doing, and then the ones that Stan had.
Well, most people don't realize that even though some of the dinosaurs weren't executed in CGI in the film, every single dinosaur design came out of the studio with you guys.
They did.
And so there was a real, continuity. It was great.
The one
Go ahead,
One
JD.
thing I wanted to add just before we moved on was this character, for me, I was focused on the eyes for this one, and as I was for most of the other ones. But I remember this was sort of one of the first ones that I put my eye mechanisms, my finished eye mechanisms in with the skin on it, and I remember thinking that the sculpture here is totally perfect for around the face, around the eyes, and I didn't have to do any excuse me, I didn't have to do any tweakage or cut and snip and tighten and loosen or anything. All the sculpture based on Crash's design just fell like right into place and just moved like as is. It was perfect.
That never happens.
We had the opportunity to work with, I believe, who were the best sculptors in the industry at that time. I mean, literally, transposing textures and skin feel and all of that stuff. I mean, they're the best. So it's always...
There were a lot
it
of
was-
techniques developed on that show for skin detail and stuff that we. Mike Tursick invented a lot of tools and
I think Mike Tursick is
I still
tuning
have
in.
my magic mic.
Mike Tursick, are you there?
Magic Mike
Hey,
tool.
Say hi, Mike.
Matt, quick question on the Brack.
Was there
Okay.
any particular inspiration for his paint scheme?
Paint scheme inspiration for the
Paint scheme,
Brachiosaur.
I remember doing page after page of little color schemes for all these various dinosaurs, and they went to Steven, and he picked the one that he wanted to go with. It's just sort of elephant,
And it was pastels, right? Were you guys basically using
crayons?
Crayons.
Crayons.
That's
back
right.
then, yeah.
We didn't do color back then.
This is before crayons.
Pencil,
There
that's
should
it,
be
no
some
crayons.
stripes.
Honestly, it was colored pencils and markers.
Yeah.
For some of the
Dead
detail, there was
serious.
a photograph of a rhinoceros I found that I
Yeah.
used for detailing some areas.
Any other stories about the Brack? before we
Well,
move
I
on?
remember the actual full-size Brachio was one of the last things we did that
Yeah.
came late to the party. I don't believe that was in the initial scope of work. And then it was decided that it would, was needed and that scene would happen. Because I remember us starting that way late in the process.
Yeah,
Was
as
it
if there
shot?
wasn't enough on your plates.
Yeah.
Was it shot in studio or in the field?
Yeah, that was shot on soundstage at Universal.
Stage at Universal.
Yeah. That whole sequence with the Jeep. No. I'm trying to remember. Was that the same stage where they had the Jeep falling down sequence?
I think that was on
That
stage
same-
27.
Yeah,
That's when
27.
we shot.
See, now I thought the spitter was the last dinosaur that was shot.
That was the last thing we shot.
Might be the
for
last
sure.
thing we
one
shot,
finished.
but
Yeah,
this was
yeah.
one of the last ones to go into actual sculpting and production.
Before Thanksgiving.
Yes, I do remember.
All right, we're going to move on to Triceratops unless we have another great question about the Brack. All right, we're going to move on to the Triceratops. Again, important to talk about design and the concept. What is your guys' recollection of sort of how it was pitched? What are we looking for here? What are those? Any memories? I know your memory's shot, Crash. So you can make stuff up. You can make stuff up if you want. It's fine. They don't know. They have no idea.
I think it was always supposed to be sick and laying down. Isn't that when the first
Yeah, this was a
sketches
very
and renderings?
sympathetic, like you were supposed to feel very sorry for this thing. So, in it being a herbivore, yet formidable, with the horns and the protection and all, it still had a kind of a cow kind of feel to it, So it, we really wanted to feel kind of pathetic. It was sick lying on its side, and so the eyes had to feel very kind of melancholy and. And Joey Roscoe did a lot of the designing in the sculpt itself, which was cool. I just did some kind of quick sketches for the pose, and then he
went to the 5th scale maquette. People have, that are tuning in, younger people that don't know what the process. There was no digital sculpting back then. There was no rapid prototyping, no milling out things. You would sculpt a 5th scale piece. Then you would cut it into segments, and then you would take those cross sections, and you'd build wooden bulkheads, and then you'd build out a full armature that you would sculpt on. And there's a team of guys doing nothing but melting clay.
Yeah.
It was all of Crash's ex-musician buddies that were out of work. Chopping clay.
Quidge! Where is Quidge? I've been trying to reach
Chopping and melting clay all day long. Putting it on these things.
And was it Plastilina? It wasn't Siobhan.
Roma.
it was
Roma. So there's you're getting all that good sulfur
If you
smell.
left it in the oven too long, it starts to crystallize.
I mean, I would
and
have
became
to
useless.
think that on Jurassic, we probably put Roma out of business for a
my
time,
No,
right?
we actually put them on the map.
I mean, we took everything for a time, and we had thousands and thousands of pounds
We
of
should
clay.
have been all stockholders in that company.
Yeah.
John would have a wheelbarrow. We had an actual wheelbarrow, and
Yeah,
we would put stuff in the oven, and you filled the wheelbarrow, and you put it down the
It's like
hall.
we're building pyramids. Remember that?
I mean, I think the rest of everybody else in town was probably sculpting in Play-Doh because we just wiped out Roma. I mean,
See, part-time glass clown.
yeah, exactly.
The other shop for a person. There you go.
All right, so look at you guys. So let's talk a little bit about that sculpture process. Obviously, those of us who were lucky enough to see that in person, the level of detail was insane.
It was a
on
beautiful,
this
beautiful
sculpture,
sculpture.
and it was. I know there was a lot of help on this, but my recollection is mainly of Joey with his long hair hunched over that thing for
Joey.
weeks.
Rob,
Yeah, he was dedicated.
Robbie.
A lot of time.
Robbie.
I
on that
sculpted
one,
the
too.
tip of the tail, actually. You don't see a lot of it. But
Did you carve your name into it secretly?
Did you put your initials
secret
in it?
message in there. Didn't we have to use that head too? When there was an upright version in Lost World that rams a truck.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of made a reappearance in the
And there
second
was a
one.
time lapse, a a film of him sculpting it too, remember?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, this one? Definitely of the T-Rex. I don't remember this
There was
one.
one
but
that
maybe.
I saw it.
There was one of that,
One
too.
of the
Any, David, any Triceratops
How
questions?
did they make it breathe? What was the mechanism?
What's the
Well, we were there for
That was
that.
Al Souza and Paul.
He's in the audience. Al Souza was a
Al, get over here.
man.
Get over here, Al Souza. If there's anyone else from JP1 in the audience, get over here.
That's not
What's
Al.
up, Al?
Al had
In
long
fact,
hair.
David, I'm going to check in the party and see if there's any people hiding from the herbivores and get them over here. All right, Al, answer that question. How did the Triceratops breathe?
It was a pretty simple mechanism, actually. It was just a post. We cut out a big cutout in the rib cage, and the skin wasn't glued down to the fiberglass right there, and we just had it looked like one of those things you go down the railroad tracks with. It had a pivot point. You push it up, and then just push the stick up, and that pushed the whole rib cage up, and it just moved underneath the skin.
How many of you were inside? I don't remember, Paul.
Dave was on tail. You were on
I
tail.
was on tail. You were on
I was actually
one
doing
of
the
the legs,
breathing.
right? Oh, you were on the breathing.
And then we had
Joey was on radio.
Yeah, Joey was outside, so he could
Doing the eyes.
work
We had
the
a
eyes and
bunch of
keep it dressed in and
Michael
shiny.
Lantieri's guys in there too.
Didn't the whole head move too?
We had about, I don't know, seven, nine.
Cutting edge technology.
Did you have to reinforce it so that Sam Neill could lean on it? Was that an issue?
No, funny
No,
story.
strong
That
enough.
was I was doing the breathing, and that was an improv. It was the first take, and all the rehearsals, he just came and kind of did his line, and didn't really do anything physical. First take, he throws his whole body weight on it, and I'm under, pulling the mechanism up, and suddenly I got 150 pounds extra weight on me. Remember that? And then he did it for every other take because Steven liked it. But that was my recollection, that suddenly the breathing got really hard.
And you didn't want to talk on camera.
The structure inside of all these puppets was some new technology that was being developed during the whole movie. And we were using a lot of aerospace technology, a lot of composite materials that really weren't being used in this type of work. And so they're very tough, very strong. There were graphite cores inside, which were pretty bomb-proof. So laying on top of it, that was not an issue.
Except for my
What
arms.
what about the baby trike? Was there a baby trike made and that didn't make the movie? There's a lot of questions about that.
We ended up in Lost World, right?
Shannon Shea,
Yes.
Right.
right?
Ended up
It was. What's interesting is to see
Baby
that
Trek.
whole scene
Baby Trek.
in the new Jurassic World where they're
Yep.
riding
Yeah, it
on
was.
these, which is what Steven wanted to have in Jurassic Park.
I wondered about that.
And it just didn't happen. I don't think it. I can't quite remember why. It was nothing other than I don't think there was enough time in the movie to have all these sequences, and it did. It got pushed and was in Lost World, in the next film. But the whole idea was, I think Lex was supposed to ride on top of on top of it, like you see in Jurassic World now. Yeah.
I think Lindsay ended up wearing it in Lost
Lindsay
World.
McGowan was inside
Yes, he
of it,
did.
yes.
Just on all fours.
On all
Just
floors.
inside there, yeah.
Sometimes it's just a
Cutting
dude on all
technology he
fours.
was talking about. Aerospace.
A guy inside doing the baby elephant.
Nothing else.
So was that filmed?
State of the art.
Was that sequence filmed, guys?
No,
No.
not in Jurassic
Not
Park
in the
1.
first
No.
Lindsay waddled out onto set, and Steven's like,
Well, no, that was in the
No,
second.
in
Didn't
Lost
make it for the
World.
first
oh, in the
it
Lost World, okay.
made- It
good.
made it to.
It never made it into JP1,
No.
but it is in JP2.
For both the Triceratops and the Brack, they have mucus in their mouth. The Brack sneezes. What was that, and how was that done?
That was real human snot. I remember.
It was a collective effort.
We do a bucket collection.
Took weeks.
No, that was Shannon Shea was really good at all the organic compounds. He had come up with a saliva formula for the T-Rex and for the Triceratops.
Super methicillin
I think it was
He was-
Methuselah
And soap,
based.
soap, with a little bit of liquid soap to get the suds up, and
There was spinach in its mouth to get that kind of mulched up greens. You know, it was chopped spinach that was in there, along with little bits of leaves and branches.
The chef.
That's all right. It's amazing what you can do with craft service.
What about the orange bubble on the tongue, the bubbly, sick tongue?
Shannon did that too. He came up with that gag and he hollowed out a
a section of the tongue, filled it with that mucus stuff, the same stuff we use, and put a little piece of saran wrap over it, so that when she squeezed it, it just came right out. And he came up with it so quickly. Wow. He loves that stuff.
Who came up with the Triceratops poop?
Triceratops
Not us.
poop.
Physical
What was
effects.
that?
The Triceratops.
Okay.
Yeah.
Physical effects.
Shannon also came up with the bird poop on the Triceratops.
You did?
He figured he used white tempera paint and a little slug of Liquitex black paint, and he'd put it into a dropper, and he would, stand
Shannon,
4
mucus
feet,
and bodily
and he
fluids
would
technician.
splash. It would look like he would splash come down and look like
on his
a real
business card.
splash. Bird poop.
Are the dilating pupils digital?
No.
Oh,
John.
pupils. Well, we're getting to carnivores. Let's not jump ahead. Let's not jump ahead. We're going to talk about that T-Rex eyeball. This is the man who built it right here. How much time do we have on herbivores, guys? Because we have to cover.
About 7 minutes. How about was the Gallimimus, which is an herbivore, ever considered to be a practical effect, or was that always going to be something digital?
No, it was never going to be practical, other than the maquette that Paul sculpted.
We'd seen a test from ILM with. We had seen a test from ILM of a herd of the Gallimimus running pretty early on, too.
Yeah.
And that kind of planted the stake as far as this is definitely going to be a CG shot.
That was the first one we ever saw.
Remember that test, the tape? I know. We thought, oh god,
VHS tape.
this is not good.
Wasn't that around the same time when I think it was MIT or Boston University sent us over all those trial robotic walking test tapes as well? We were looking at that. I think production sent us over some of those tapes for us mechanical guys to kind of get some ideas about walking and pedestrian.
And Phil Tippett was a huge proponent to everything too, because we were going to do it stop motion initially.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the CG came in, and Phil was like, "Wow, I just lost my job." So he became like kind of a motion specialist, which was really cool. So he was hugely instrumental in helping us out with a lot of stuff.
All right, we have a final question on the herbivores, then we have to move on.
How did they determine what colors to make them? What was for all of them? For the Parasaurolophus, there were 2 of them. They were slightly different colors. What was determined?
These
then?
guys, did you work on the color schemes for those? In
We
JP1?
did work on
Everybody
color
teamed up.
schemes for all those, yeah.
We knew that the new idea was that they were possibly much more colorful than anyone had ever anticipated before, and we didn't want to go overboard to where it was clownish, but we did kind of play with some pretty striking color combinations, and ultimately we toned everything down a little bit, but we did start off with some pretty vibrant colors, and just to kind of work into the new idea of like Horner's new ideas about dinosaurs and Backer. It was a very exciting time for paleontology at that time, so we kind of wanted to embrace that, as well as Stephen really wanted to embrace that. They're fast moving and they maybe look a little different than everyone had thought they had.
There was that book, the Gregory Paul book,
Right,
and
yeah.
there was a lot of research that had come out, and it was really, it was changing, and all of us as artists wanted to make sure that we were reflecting those changes into, the T-Rex was not dragging its tail like it used to be pictured back in the 30s. That was his balance. So all of that stuff that we all look at, take for granted, was being woven into those designs at that point in time.
I think the film even pushed the scientific understanding in some ways, right? I mean, this movie had so much invested in it that you guys were actually able to do the research that maybe a university paleontologist couldn't do, I think. Except for changing things like the raptors being, not that size.
The Velociraptors were really more
There's a couple of questions here. How much was science and how much was fantasy and filmmaker inspiration?
Well, there's always an element of fantasy, with dinosaurs, because no one's ever seen one, but there's a lot of science as well. So I think we really embraced any aspect of the science that we could. Before it's still a film, and it still has to be exciting, and there's certain parameters you got to kind of work with to make that happen. So you take a little bit of artistic license, but ultimately, and Stephen was on board with this as well, to really try to make these feel as real as possible, which was which is really great.
I mean, I know you drew over skeletons.
No, I didn't trace though. Don't draw over is a bad way to say that.
Okay.
Tracing 3 years, that's okay. All right, guys, we are going to wrap it up on herbivores. Any final memories about working on those vegetable-eating creatures in the first Jurassic Park?
I remember Evan Brainerd and Charles Lucas working on the Brachiosaur, coming up with the chewing jaw, and I remember them working it out for the first time and just coming up with that side-to-side motion. I thought, oh God, it's going to be so perfect. And then I remember these guys loading it up with once they put the vegetables in the jaws, and we did it a quick run through in the shop there. And I had worked all night long installing that stuff, and as soon as I got the eyeballs installed and set right, I think the very next morning, either Beth and Andy or somebody came in and put the skin on it, threw it, did a quick test on it, and I was like, wow, it all just came together super fast, and it was just nailed. It was so great.
That was an exciting time because you'd walk through, because I think we doubled the size of the studio at that point.
We did.
And you just kind of come in the morning and walk through, and people had been up all night, and so you'd walk by and see a Brachie chewing and a T-Rex throwing a chair, and it was really
doing the test puppeteering on that. And I remember Shane just running outside and grabbing shrubbery, just ripping stuff out of the beds and coming and stuffing it into the mouth.
But the fact that it was real and puppets, and to walk in and see it and feel it and experience the size, it's really cool.
Well, that was the first big dinosaur that I got to skin, and the skins were like, they were so big. Really, and I remember there was like 6 people on each side just holding the seams together so I could sew them shut, and they shrank like crazy.
Yeah. A lot of people want to know what's used for the skin. What is the skin? What's it made of?
Foam rubber latex,
Yeah. Early on, we did do some tests, believe it or not, with some silicones and urethanes. But as heavy as the foam was, all those other materials weighed like 3 or 4 times that in weight.
Especially when they get wet.
We'll talk about that.
Let's save that. Yeah, I'm loading for the
good. It's coming up, guys.
But foam rubber. I mean, gallons and gallons of foam rubber were pumped into these things, these skins.
All right, well, that wraps up the herbivores, guys. We are going to be back after a short break. We are going to start talking about the carnivores of Jurassic Park. The raptors, the T-Rex, the spitter. Who am I missing? Who else eats people? Well, you know them. You know them better than we do. So stick around. And again, if you have questions, please type them into the comments box. To make it easy for David Sanger, who is moderating, put the first name of the movie, the JP1, JP2, JP3, whatever it is, and the name of the dinosaur, and then ask your comment. It's going to make his life a lot easier. So we are going to commercial now, and we'll be back with carnivores from JP. Woo!
Right. The Tyrannosaurus Rex, we built full size. 9,000 pounds of a completely full-size animatronic robotic machine.
This is Richard Landon, mechanical designer for Stan Winston Studios on the original Jurassic Park project. I was in charge of creating the armature that supported the full-size sculpting stand for the T-Rex.
I'm Mike Tersick, and I was one of the artists fortunate enough to work on this project.
This is Shane Mahan, and we'll be talking about the creation of the sculpture of the full-size T-Rex from the first Jurassic Park.
Over there, a little bit more this way. Good. Okay, go back the other way.
Here's Stan talking to Steven Spielberg into the camera.
It's all for you, Steven. We love dinosaurs.
You're watching a very quick progression. That small 5th scale sculpture that you saw was the basis of these parts and components that you see now. We took the 5th scale, which was sculpted, and then it was cut like so many loaves of bread, if you can imagine that. Each piece was then numbered, and then the parts are cut out so that they can fit over the structure, the metallic structure that's going to support these pieces. So it's basically like constructing a hull of a ship. You see 15, 16, so on and so on. And how that was done was the parts were numbered top to bottom, analyzed, and then put on an opaque projector. And the projector was then projected on the wall to the correct scale, and then the wood was cut accordingly. So it was all done by eye and mathematics and a lot of calculations.
God, it was just an incredible undertaking, really, when I think back on it, that we actually managed to pull this off. There was so much ingenuity. Everybody really pulled together and really made this work. There's the miniature that Rich did, and the armature, and then the full-size armature in the background. I believe those are the legs as well that you see, the tall pieces. So we're just about to get ready here and place the bulkheads on.
We were actually using techniques that were developed, hundreds and hundreds of years ago by sculptors of large bronzes and such. There's the 5th scale painted, and that was our guide and our gauge for the reconstruction, because what we had to do is reconstruct the sculpture from scratch.
And Stan would come in on a regular basis and say, okay, I want to be sure that I've got room for the nostrils, I've got room for the eyes. Are you sure this spacing is correct? And that would not only mathematically prove on paper that it was correct, but then I had to also have to satisfy him artistically. And we would adjust little things like how much the belly would hang or how much the tail would droop. And some things weren't exactly the same as the original plan structure, but we changed it so that the artist liked it, because it's the artist's eye that always decided what the final product was there at Stan's.
Now a process of chicken wire and fiberglass is laid over the chassis of the creature's body. This is to give the clay something to stick to without going right through the wire, because at some point the weight would just push through. Respirators, doors are open. Okay, now many weeks later in this process, the first layers of clay are just being sort of drafted into place. This takes many days, and this is Roma clay. This is not a sulfur-free clay. This is Roma clay. I think it's a number 2 or number 3 medium clay. And those are gauge sticks. Those sticks that you see in there are gauges of thickness for the calculation of skin and where bones may go. What we had to do was we would take the 5th scale little castings and using the measurements recreate everything. Mike Tursick was in charge of sculpting the head predominantly.
My focus was the head and neck area. I wanted to make sure that I could keep that as accurate as possible. By this time, I knew the sculpture pretty intimately because I'd done the 5th scale and the small scale, and here we are on the big one. So basically, everybody, if they had a sculpting question, they ran to me and for answers.
It was somebody's job every morning to cut clay from the packages and put pallets of clay in the oven in the other side of the building early in the morning to heat it up so that the clay was warm. This whole process from start to finish took 16 weeks to complete, just for the sculpture, not talking about molding it and casting it. I believe it was just for the sculpture.
I would close my eyes at night and see scale patterns.
This neat little tool I made. Kind of cool.
Very
It's
nice.
got a little round
Fantastic tool design.
You could do this. Before, see, the primitive method was with this, and you would have to do this and then turn it.
I actually, I remember I put my initials MT up on the top of the T-Rex head, and Stan saw it. He said, "What's this?" And quickly I said, "Stan, you're looking at it upside down. That's not an MT. That's a WI for Winston Incorporated."
The teeth here are just have been mocked up out of foam core to get the look. the absolute look of how it's going to feel. But you can see like all the subtlety of wrinkles, scales. You know, this character had to feel 100% real, or the film just did not work.
Each sculptor would bring their favorite technique and their little tricks of the trade. Some of them would take the clay and stir it up with alcohol or acetone and liquefy it, and then they could apply sort of a sluice that almost looked like aged skin drawn out over an area. Other guys had different tools and techniques that they would try and teach the other guys to use, and over the course of the 3 months of the sculpture, they ended up doing a really good job of doing a really unified look. Everyone had their own contribution, and yet the T-Rex looked like one creature, not a patchwork quilt of various styles. There's the full-size T-Rex really kind of coming together. You can see the legs are on. She still needs her small arms up there at the base of her neck, but she's standing up into the top of the building. They actually had to raise the roof, literally, so that when she began moving and they did the mechanical structure, she'd have somewhere to go. The small forearms were sculpted on a separate stand down a little closer to the ground, and then Stan would request on a regular basis that the whole thing be assembled so that you could tell the proportions were all correct, that everything looked right in relation to one piece to the next. Spielberg came by on a regular basis too. He stayed very involved in how it looked. The legs were originally aluminum structures on the exterior. You can see the aluminum sticking out of the side, and that ended up being not enough to support the weight, so we had to change to steel exoskeletons to sort of hold up all that weight.
Thank you very much for watching. The creation of the T-Rex was monumental in the history of Stan Winston Studio, and it was one of Stan's great and most prized creations of creatures that he had done.
I'm Richard Landon. Thank you for watching the behind the scenes on the creating the full-size Tyrannosaurus Rex sculpture. It was a huge personal point of pride for me that Stan trusted me to create something so large and so heavy. Having had no background before, we all grew out of makeups and Terminators and little tiny things, and for Stan to embrace this group of people as having the ability to step up and grow up and build something this fantastic and gigantic was a huge point of personal pride.
I haven't seen this video in years, and again, looking back at this, I can only wonder, what were we thinking?
Everyone's been waiting for everyone loves herbivores, of course, but you know, everyone likes carnivores more. Would you say that's maybe true? For sure. And you guys are some of the people responsible for doing it. I think we should start out with the spitter and work our way up. So raise your hand if you're on the spitter crew. All right, we got Grasso, Gallinson, Kim, Rich, and JD, and Crash. Yeah. Right? So let's start with that design again.
Designing it.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
The design cues for the spitter really came out of the book, and Michael Crichton had kind of taken some artistic license with the idea of a frill kind of opening up, and Stephen loved that idea and that shot, so we designed that into this character. It doesn't mean that it didn't have that, but it was definitely one of the more creative kind of things that we did with the dinosaurs. Mechanically, these guys will get into it. It proved to be some issues, but and it's a lot smaller too than an actual Dilophosaur. And again, so we're taking kind of, for the film, what was right for the film, and expounding on some of the science that was there. We still wanted it to feel very real, and it's got a very kind of curious attitude about it. So with all of those cues, the designs kind of, like this one in particular, that kind of, the way dogs kind of look at you like when they don't understand what you're saying, it's that kind of quizzical look. So pieces like that were kind of necessary to really kind of sell the character of the dinosaur.
And he was meant to be a surprise. We don't want to know that Nedry's going to get eaten right away.
Yeah, it's like,
maybe
he's
found
kind of
one
cute.
cute one on the...
Yeah, exactly. Then no, not so much.
And then Shane Mahan was instrumental in the sculpt phase. He did the maquette and also the full size, right?
Yeah.
Was that a Shane solo job? I think he worked on that thing for a full year.
Didn't Adam work on that? Adam Jones?
Adam Jones.
Adam
Yes.
Jones actually worked on the maquette as
And
well.
then Adam left to go do Tool.
Yep.
Yes. Then he became a rock star.
He sure did.
Yep.
He left. Would you have left Jurassic Park to become a rock star?
To be in Tool, sure.
Yeah.
Everyone. You think dinosaurs are cool? We think rock stars are cool. All right. So once you guys had a signed off sculpt, it was time to get your molds done and get the mechanics working. So let's talk about anyone in the molding process for that. Mitch, Dave, you want to talk about any challenges before we get into mechanics?
Well, I remember something that happened when we were molding him. We molded one side, and it was fine, and then we started to mold the other side, and all we got was the surface coat on it. And then we had to move it for some reason to get something out of the way. And then when we finished molding that one side, we opened it up, and all the detail had been wiped out for some reason.
The form was there, but the
No
detail
detail.
was gone, and it was also
Just on that one side, though.
Yeah, just on that one side. And I think what it was is that with syntactic dough and the Alumilite and the aluminum filled epoxy, which is kind of like a new process that we all started using because it was a real lightweight process. I think what it was is what you did was did the first layer of the aluminum filled epoxy, then you did 2 layers of glass, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Then we did syntactic dough over that, and then another 2 layers of glass.
There will
over
be a
that.
quiz. You better be taking notes at the end. Go ahead.
When we were
Mitch.
tapping into the first layer with the glass, that's probably when it released.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I think
So-
it was sticking, and it was.
So was
we were
Shane there
pulling
when
it
you
away
guys
from the
demolded
sculpt.
that thing?
Yeah, well, what it was is that I remember there was a thing where I was talking to Shane and John about it. This is going to get really boring. But we ended up, and I kind of spearheaded that, if I remember correctly, doing a clay pour and put the whole thing back together with a fiberglass understructure, injected clay with a mold that was easily removable with a silicone mold. That way we had a clay representation, one smooth, one detailed, and then we matched the detail.
What's so great about that is that out of all of the dinosaurs, that was the most labor intensive with the texture because it was this pebbly, bumpy, and so Shane had put just little balls of clay on each single one.
Losing his mind.
And it was just gone.
And it was erased. Oh, you win some, you lose some.
Hey, we fixed it. It was a good
So then you guys got a form for you mechanics to start. And Rick, you were new to the shop, right? When you were thrown.
Yeah, I was. I just come in on Batman Returns, and we worked on the Penguins, and then Jurassic started up right after that. So we had a meeting in the break room, and we were deciding. We'd all read the book, and wanted to say who was going to work on what creature, and I was fairly new to mechanics, so I to say the least, very green.
Tell us now.
And now I tell you, it's perfect timing. Hey, John, I don't know if you want to put me on that one. And the meeting in the break room was who wants to work on the T-Rex, and I was the main character, and everybody raised their hand, all the veterans, and of course they got picked for that, and then who wants to work on the Raptors, and more veterans, and then who wants to work on the Spitter, and I'm thinking, well, I'm the new guy, I just learned how to use these machines, and I just raised my hand like I'll be assisting one of you guys to build it, and they went, oh, great, Rick, and he writes me down, and I'm like, and that's my first acting job, where I just shut my mouth and just let it roll. And
It's a little indie. Who's going to see it?
So I watched what they did, and I learned from them, and it worked out really well. But I mean, I was scared to death, just being assigned it that quickly, just kind of, oh my God. So, yeah. So
Until you make it, buddy.
What's that? Yeah.
So who pitched in with you on the mechanical side of the Spitter? Let's talk about that.
John was doing the eyes on those, and I think I can't remember, it was so long ago, and this is some strong coffee, so
That's right. Well,
I'm
by the
sure
way,
I had
we're all
help.
drinking coffee and herbal tea.
Yes.
All right.
I can't remember. I mean, I know I had help from everybody in the shop. It was a collective effort,
I remember you going just methodically through every move, and I remember you were on that thing for a long time, just focused on it, and then it wasn't until you were done with that, I think you hopped over to helping out the Raptor guys or whatever.
Oh, well, I actually wasn't done with it at that point. I analyzed the movement of the Spitter by analyzing an ostrich gait. We had some National Geographic video of an ostrich moving, and I put vellum on the TV screen, and I actually mapped out the movements of the ankles and hips on that as an ostrich move to get the
So
feeling
you
of
traced it like Crash does.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, that's why he ran out of tracing
That's how
paper.
they do it. Aerospace.
We had to find another supplier.
That was cutting edge technology.
It was, and after I got to a certain point building the Spitter,
I wasn't finished, and I got pulled onto the Raptor crew to help them out so they could hit their deadlines, which was shooting before us. And so they said, well, we'll be back. We'll be done way before you're even going to set. We'll come in and help you for a few weeks and get you finished. Well, their shooting schedule just continued to keep going, and they were there the whole time. And so nobody came back to help me make up those weeks that I left.
Guys, I don't know what I'm doing.
And I was sitting in the shop just sweating and dying, going, oh, it was all getting done, but it just takes time. And I was praying for the big earthquake. Just, come on, bring the building down. And then I don't have an excuse why it's not done, because I'm just going crazy. And I just, thank God.
It eventually came. But
yeah.
So, any other mechanical memories about that spitter before we move on? Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, just that crazy leg mechanism you made where you have a chair and you're sitting on top of it.
Yeah.
And Rich and you guys are trying to lower him in. That was like one of the craziest mechs I've ever seen, but it worked cool.
It was like a Pharaoh's chair. We had
cool.
4 people or so on poles holding the chair and me above it. And to get the legs, the hips to hit the ground correctly, my feet were strapped into basically the hips of the dinosaur so I could push them with my legs. And then we had joysticks moving the ankles and the hips so we could get these cool walking motions when it came into the frame and hopped. Like the camera was really low, panning across the ground. Nedry was in the background with his Jeep or his winch, and it comes in and jumps in and out. So that was bungee corded to the perms in the stage, and then we had people lifting the weight and kind of bouncing in and out. And I don't know who came up with that idea.
In the rain.
Was that?
In the rain.
In the rain. Yeah, that was the wettest set I've ever been on. That was crazy.
This is nonstop. Dave, do we have any spitter questions?
We do. Were there 2 built, one with frill, one without, or was there only one that one made?
No, there were 2 different versions. One that had the frill to open, and actually no, there were three. There was one where the frill was sculpted closed, so it was a lot thicker foam along the neck, kind of restricted some of the left and right movements. The neck could go from looking straight forward, curved all the way around, and look that way, so it could go 270 degrees in each direction if you really wanted to do it. Mostly it was just side-to-side movements that we saw, but the second spitter neck was the frill was down against the neck, ready to be deployed. And so when it came time for that, it popped open, and then they cut away, and we went back to the third neck. Yeah, the vibration thing was just crazy, old school. Just
No high-tech solutions.
And,
grab a string.
The third version was the frill was out the entire time, and the head was doing its thing.
Another question towards the on the spitter, but also a little bit more general. Who decides what the mechanics of any individual creature are? Is that decided? Is that Stan who decided that? Is it you guys who decided? Did the filmmakers decide?
It's kind of resting on the shoulder of the mechanics who are in charge of it, and then we have supervisors like the head mechanic Richard Landon. He would be kind of looking over, saying, that's fine, keep going. But basically, we look at the storyboards and see all the moves that it has to do. It's got to be able to look left to right, cock its head like it's thinking about you, like Crash had mentioned. That was a really integral part to it, kind of like, I can't, And do the fingers have to move, or do they just have to be static? And all the moves that we have to put in it. And then we go and we build them to fit in the creature and actuate them the way we need to actuate them. So it's kind of up to the person designing the creature. Because the movie makers, the producers...
Stan would definitely weigh in on
Yeah.
what he wanted to see as well, as far as movement goes. What he felt like was the most important. And then, you're embellishing upon that not wish list, but, what he felt it was going to take to pull off the shot.
He usually came in with a real strong performance side of it, of like, this is the performance that this needs to accomplish. So it was nice to have that reminder always that this is still an acting character, so it's got to be able to do all this stuff.
So we're creating a character first here.
Yeah. And you guys had the benefit of animatics. You had boards, great storyboards. Every shot in that film was storyboarded, and very different from today, but where you could really say, okay, what does it have to do in this shot? Great, that's what we're building for that. Inserts, whatever.
But I mean, I echo John's sentiment. Like, Stan would come in like almost every other day, and like he definitely had a roadmap of every character of what he wanted to see out of everyone. And so he would come and visit us and give us thoughts and critiques and see how we were doing or whatever. We'd give him little presentations along the way about what our concepts were, and he'd say, yeah, no. We were like, okay. And then we'd try something else, and then he would do that. But he was definitely, he was in there. He definitely
there was a lot riding on this for you guys. This was a monumental thing to take on without knowing if it would work. I mean, it's
General
crazy.
questions, Matt. Did anybody know how big a movie it was going to be?
Yes. Okay. Let's talk about that, and then we're going to go into the Raptors. Let's. Any final spitter thoughts before we get into to that great question? Any final spitter thoughts? Anyone? All right.
Filming.
Raise your hand if you knew how big it would be. Keep your hand down if you're like, maybe. Raise your hand.
I think everyone thought it'd be huge.
I don't see a lot of hands raised.
We were seeing, I remember
Now.
going to that screening at Universal, and I remember that we didn't know what was going to happen. Honestly, we worked our asses off, and we thought it looked great, but it was really difficult to really judge with the CG stuff mixing in and things being taken away and added in, and
We were kind of scared of that.
it was scary. And once we saw the movie, it was just, this is
When
amazing.
I saw Ray Harryhausen show up, and Paul Mejias pulled me over and said, "JD, you got to come meet this guy." And I go, "Who is this guy?" And he said, "That's Ray Harryhausen." I, "Hi, Mr. Harryhausen." Then from that point, I knew it was going to be big.
That's right. You get Ray's stamp, you're good. All right. Any other thoughts about that besides the movie? Raptor time. It is Raptor time. I don't know. It's my personal favorite's the T-Rex, I have to say, but the Raptors are a close second. Raise your hand if you worked on a Raptor in any capacity. That's pretty much everyone right here. And we're going to get to T-Rex and talk about that goat, Lance Anderson. But we're going to talk Raptors for a little while. My second father, Lance Anderson, made the goat that the T-Rex eats. And we are, and, you know, you may be impressed with dinosaurs, but goats that are lifelike are much more difficult.
Hey, wait a minute.
All right, so let's start with design, guys. Throw out ideas. What was the pitch? When you first heard about what they were looking for these characters, what was that pitch like?
Well, you know, we had a manuscript of the book. The book hadn't come out yet. And in it was this great scene where they walk up to a fence and they're kind of like, what's in here? And out of the shrubs, bushes, come these three beasts, slam up against the fence and snarling and, you know, fast, and then they're gone. And that, to me, kind of set the standard and the pace for the entire idea of what was going to be different about these dinosaurs in this movie. And, you know, the Raptors, they were the Mako sharks of the film. You know, they had to be lean and fast and mean and scary and yet have attitude and intelligence. You know, a lot of stuff that you just don't really, you know, initially put into a dinosaur design. So they were fun. I mean, I think that's why everyone was so attracted to the Raptors, because even reading the manuscript, they were the star of the show. You know, the T-Rex was huge, but the Raptors, there was just something really cool about them.
In the public, I don't think until this movie came out, really were that familiar with what a velociraptor was.
Mm-hmm.
I think I mean, if you were into dinosaurs and science, you did. But I think the general public became very familiar once this came out. And it's a bit of a cheat, because a velociraptor is a much smaller animal. And I think what Stephen wanted was what was called a Deinonychus, that had the really big toe and much larger size. So that was where it veered a little bit to fantasy. Not that we strayed in the look of what you think it would be based on the bone structure, but that we made them a little bigger and badder.
But then the Utah Raptor was discovered
Right
when
after
the movie
film
came out,
opened,
right?
and they
It's like,
found
they
one
weren't. Yeah.
that they called the Utah Raptor. That was the exact same size as what we built
Yeah.
in the film.
Yeah.
So, you know.
We actually made that and went out and buried it.
Buried it.
Just like preemptive, enough for the criticism.
Now
but
leave
the
us
Raptor
alone.
made it forward.
Anonymous
So
tip.
who worked
Look
on the
over
fake
there
Utah
behind
Raptor
a rock.
corpse? If you raise your hand. All right, well, getting into the sculpt. Chris Swift was instrumental in this, as were many others. We wish Chris was with us. He's out of town. But let's talk about the sculpting phase. Obviously, the design, moving into
Chris
maquette.
he was doing maquettes, and he moved into all the full-size Raptor stuff. And Greg Fiegel was also sculpting in parallel on a suit version of the Raptor, and it shared some parts between the two, like the heads and hands and things that could be incorporated on both of them. But it was sculpted. We did a little maquette there, of
That's you.
It is me inside of it, and to work out what the feasibility was to actually put somebody in there. And I was in one, Crash was in another Raptor as well, and we had our Raptor training together.
Oh yeah, you guys were always in your workout gear, getting in shape during lunch.
Yeah. Raptor boot camp. Yeah.
It was you guys had your Olivia Newton-John headbands. Like a maniac.
Toughest life cast I've ever had done. Standing there like this for an hour and a half.
I think we have that. Oh no, I think we have that shot somewhere. We'll look for it. So anyone else touch the sculpture before we move on to the mold making process and then the mechanics? And guys, I should say we are running long. We will tighten things up as we move along, but this has never happened before. And are you guys okay with this running a little long tonight? Is everyone okay with that?
Sure.
Okay, for those of you who aren't, I'm sorry, but it's gonna go long. Let's talk about anything else of sculpture-wise. Dave?
Well, I worked with John and Greg and Andy. I remember working on the whole team, on the suit team. And then we had 2 platforms. And Chris, I remember being very fast, and I remember the rumor about Figgle. I love Figgle, he's great, but he was kind of slow. And so there were 2 teams that were like boats, and I remember our team was called the SS Milker.
Taking your time.
And Swift was, I think, kicking Figgle's butt.
It was Swift.
Yeah. Yes, for sure, right out of the womb. But it was a lot of fun. We had a great time working together, and then they.
You're getting all the inside dope here, kids.
So we go into the mold making process. Who was involved in that? All of you. Any snafus? Or did it go smoothly with molding these sculptures?
Yeah.
No spitter tragedies, losing all the detail?
No. The Raptors, T-Rex, all those things. It was newer technology for what we were doing. Making everything out of these high temp epoxies.
And did Tony McRae bring that technology to the table?
Tony McRae, who I guess is not here tonight.
No, Tony couldn't be here.
Was instrumental in bringing that to our shop.
From aerospace.
From aerospace. At that point in time, there was a lot of folks that were moving over from aerospace into the movie. Rich Hogan, sitting right here, from the mechanical end of things, was involved in aerospace. So it came at a good time for us because we were incorporating, these techniques for mold making. And the reason for doing this was because traditional fiberglass molds, that big, that long, going into an oven, cooking out this would have warped. So we had to figure out another way to make these molds so that they would hold up through repeated runnings and not be distorted. And so there was a lot of things being developed simultaneously, mechanical breakthroughs in both Raptors, T-Rex, all of everything across the. It really was a groundbreaking show.
And those mold materials now are the industry standard for appliance molds and everything.
Yeah.
And you guys started. There's so many things were started on this movie in that way. I want to talk about mechanics. The great thing about these characters is every technique was used. There were insert puppets. There were suits. Are they seeing Shane getting mauled?
Yeah.
Are they seeing that? We're gonna get to those. I mean, there were simple fabricated suits. There were insert puppets. There were full-size cable-controlled puppets. No hydraulics in this film, but there were a lot of different puppets built. Who wants to get started on building these Raptors? Who wants to?
I think Rich Hogan should talk about a lot of the Raptor.
I wasn't key on it though. I was just a helper bee.
Don't argue with John. Just start talking.
Craig Caden and Patrick Shern.
Craig Caden, are you in the house? Craig's going to be here. He'll be here later.
Patrick Shern.
Shern should be here later as well.
And Jeff Edwards.
They're missing every
Those were the main guys on that. I was just kind of an underling. This is my second show.
So what was it like working for those really smart guys?
Yeah, he was showing me how.
Poor test pilot from aeronautics comes in.
It was all new to me, so just. I was just making parts for them.
Really, I don't know what to tell you.
You're doing more than that.
So
instrumental in creating new reverse parallelograms and movement and
engineering things. It really brought a different way of looking at things.
Those big cable
And of course, because
controllers?
Rich
That
could
wasn't me.
Make
I
the
was just
parts.
following somebody.
They went from square blocks to much more organic shapes and things like that. I don't know, when we get our first CNC? Was it on Jurassic?
No,
It was after.
It was after.
Plus,
We
Rich,
ordered them out.
Rich taught us all how to machine correctly.
Yeah, I think
We were all
that might
garage
have been
hacks,
something I
just
might have
like
done
machining poorly. And he's like, no, you got to do it like this. We're like,
He had
saved
to,
you
his
hours.
stuff
He was-
had to work with re-entry in the
he's like
atmosphere.
super precise. We're like, whatever, and he's like, no, make it out of one part. Do that. And he really, he helped me, and I know he helped everybody else here.
Oh, absolutely.
Have you seen all those kids?
You did everything with the
Yeah, the bus.
Come on.
And the church was even bigger.
With a raptor.
The burning church.
It's sort of the same thing that Andy just said about the mold making technology. Most of the guys in the industry were self-taught garage mechanics. And that's about the time that we got guys like Rich Hogan and Al Souza that came from mechanical industry and aerospace, and that elevated all of us. We needed to actually learn how to operate the mill. I think Rich, you got us our first height gauge. With the correct marble base that was actually flat instead of
brought
putting
in
it
a
on
surface plate
Formica
when I came
kitchen
in.
table. So, and that is now industry standard. Everyone works to that standard.
I would like to put our hands together for the man who turned around Stan Winston's studio, Rich. I think it's wonderful, and finally the story has been told. And crash traces always art. All right, you've learned two things tonight. Any other Raptor stories? I think we should get on set. If there's any mechanical stories, shout them out. Any painting stories on those Raptors, shout them out. Jinky?
No.
You got no stories?
I have nothing to add.
You know, that was actually a lot of fun for me. I actually painted the very first Raptor, and then thank God I didn't have to paint them all afterwards because of all the spots and dots on them.
Oh yeah.
But there was something that was interesting effect in that movie that was unintentional that I never thought was a good thing. I thought we came up with these really neat paint jobs on them where they were very colorful, and in certain lighting situations you see them in the movie, but then with all the blue light on the set, it actually canceled out all of the orange and yellow color in the Raptors. So a lot of the movie they look gray.
Yeah,
I
gray
think
green.
a lot of people thought they were like gray green when they actually weren't. They were very much like a leopard or jaguar in their brightness. But that's one of those stories that
I
come
have
about.
I have a quick note about because I was sort of I did all the eyes for all the characters, and so I was kind of treading the line between cosmetic and as well as mechanical design. And I remember that all along Stan wanted me to put in nictitating eyelids with the Raptors, and I had at that point had not done that yet. And for those who don't know what that is, it's a protective membrane that comes up from underneath a set of eyelids on a shark or a lizard, and it actually it rolls up and protects the eye when they go underwater or they go in sand or something like that. So Stan had collected some National Geographic videos, and he allowed me to go up into his office and just I'd spent like probably a week just studying Komodo dragons, and how they would walk around, and looked at the eye bags and the way that they moved, and especially the nictitating eyelids. So based on the Komodo dragons, that's basically what those are, the Velociraptor eyelids. But Stan had also asked me to do the same thing for the T-Rex. He wanted the T-Rex to have nictitating lids too. So the whole time on the whole show, I was designing this giant eyelid to fire off when the T-Rex was going to start performing. But they were so big, and at the last minute, for some reason, either Steven or Stan just killed the idea of that extra element, so I got it out of there.
But it's there for the Raptors.
But it's there for the Raptors.
We got Raptor questions. Go ahead, Dave.
All right, let's just kind of rapid fire a bunch of them. On the design end, were feathers ever considered for the Raptors in JP1?
We talked about it, but
Not really in JP1.
we thought that was just going a little too far.
How long from beginning of design to delivery on set was the process of making the Raptor suits? People ask this about every dinosaur, but just in general, if you can talk about that.
It was quite a long time, actually. We had some time, months.
The first one we did a solid year on, didn't we?
Yeah. A year of prep before a camera rolled, right?
Yeah, it was over a year.
You see in the suits.
Not very easily, no.
monitor that was close, this close to
Yeah.
your face worked, yeah, you could.
Yeah, that worked. And your lower back is screaming.
How many hours did you have to wear them?
The scene, the initial scene in the kitchen where the raptor comes in, which happened to be me and Hoots, I remember hanging in it for 4 hours before they got to shooting me. And
that was on purpose.
And he didn't need to be. We just forgot about it. He was our boss.
Were the faces operated from inside or from outside?
outside.
They were animatronics?
Cable controlled.
Well,
What?
a lot of radio.
Radio on the heads.
face.
Yeah.
On the face.
On the jaw
suits,
and blink.
On the suits, the broad kind of head move was from inside. On the puppets and the insert heads and that type of thing, it was radio control facial features, as it was even on the suit, and then it was cable to control and move the gross head and neck motions.
What foam? Do we know? Was it the same latex that was used for the other dinosaurs that was used in the suits? Was that latex rubber? Or?
Yep. No, it was all foam rubber. We made a conscious decision to that was going to be the material of choice for all of it because it needed to also get patched and seamed together, and we didn't really have that technology down for the other materials at that point in time, and there was also weight consideration.
And plus silicone just wasn't developed yet like that.
Not like that.
Yeah, there was
like that.
one, but it was so weak it had the lowest tear strength. It was just unbelievable.
And we did do lots of tests with urethanes, but they presented a whole nother set of problems.
A couple of more questions. Where are these suits now?
They've disintegrated, most likely.
A foam rubber doesn't have a long shelf life. People
John
don't
and I
realize.
burned them. In effigy.
And there's many people are asking the question because this is a recent viral thing. Whose hand steadies the raptor's tail?
My pal Patrick. I was standing next to him behind there. We were all puppeteering.
That guy right there.
He was caught on camera.
Yeah, we're all puppeteering with the cable controllers just on the outside. And I remember
Patrick should be here.
Yeah.
He'll have to. All right, we are.
I have a question.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Can you tell us, or have you already articulated about the T-Rex and the rain and the...
We're moving on to T-Rex.
He's
next.
coming next.
Yeah, we're coming on T-Rex now. We're going to wrap up Raptors, and then Karen Winston requests that we talk about T-Rexes, and that's what we're going to do.
She's saying end this is what she's saying.
Any final thoughts on Raptors before we move on to T-Rex? Guys? Richard, go ahead.
I don't want to open a whole can of worms because I know we're going long, but if you're saying raptor, there was also a hatchling velociraptor.
Well, oh yes, let's talk about the baby, and then the T-Rex. You got to wait for the T-Rex. I'm sorry. Well, Mom, do we do T-Rex now and then we do baby? Okay, for my mom, we're doing T-Rex first. It's okay. My mom says it's okay. We're gonna do the baby. Let's talk about that baby.
Crash's design to Greg Fiegel's sculpture, shortcutting the process entirely if you want. My contribution was the mechanical design. Smallest thing that I had ever built. The number that jumps into my mind that I remember most clearly was that the steel cables were rated at 18 pounds of braking strength, which sounds like a lot, 18 pounds. Wow, that's a pretty heavy weight, but when you use the leverage of a mechanical controller, you can squeeze 18 pounds in each finger. So it was very easy to break all of the cables. But
Why did you choose such breakable material, Richard?
I remember Richard stringing
Hard
up.
knocks, he learned the hard way.
I remember Richard stringing up the controllers, and they looked like human hairs. I'm like, oh god, they were so thin
because of the number of functions Stan insisted upon, and it actually had the nictitating membrane inside its eyes.
Individual finger movements.
Yeah.
And the eggshells on those were real tricky too. They were slush cast plastic.
They were wax.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shane worked out that.
You made all of those, didn't you, Dave?
Was their hand in it, or was it controlled remotely?
The original design for the breakthrough was we had a rigid puppet that was fully painted that was supposed to be broken through from the underside. The stage was hollow, and we worked up through a column. We had originally had a rigid, basically this full bust that we were going to break through from the inside, and then once that was open, we would then replace that with the animatronic that would flop out, and then Sam Neill would pick up. Stan, right before we rolled camera, came to me and said, "Do you think it's okay if we use the hero puppet to break through?" And I said, "That's a lot."
The one with the really weak wire.
That was the number that was running through my head.
You know that breakable thing you built, Rich? Can
Yes.
we use that to do something really hard?
So the actual, I don't know if we actually broke a little bit with the original piece, but most of the breakaway scene is the hero puppet coming all the way through and out, and I think we only did like 2 takes.
Well, because then it broke.
Huh?
No. Did it ever break?
Actually, very few of the cables broke. I remember the eyes worked throughout. I think I had 1 lunch hour to break one to fix one of the neck cables.
Any other thoughts about that? Who was on that set
Well,
puppeteering that?
I'm just thinking about more about the technology that happened, not just the syntactic dough making, but I just remember the vacuum bagging, how that was also another amazing thing where you would get you couldn't do it with fiberglass, like you were talking about. Things would warp. I don't know. You'd probably say more about that.
He's talking about a process that we used to make the cores with the graphite, which, race car and all that.
They do it all
technology.
now.
They've been doing that. They were doing that already for years. But what it did is it enabled something to be super, super strong without extra material being soaked into it. It didn't get thick. It didn't pool. It controlled exactly, the thickness that you wanted, and it compressed, and it made it really tough, very strong, and that went across the board for all the dinosaurs. That became the way.
Those cores were remarkable. There was no twist or flex in them. They were rigid, completely rigid.
What was the goop in the egg?
Ooh, the goop, the egg
It's like a
goop.
Methacel.
Was that a Shannon Shea?
That was a
Did you
Shannon
come in
Shea
and bring some?
special, yes.
And actually, it was also lined with a very thin stipple of balloon rubber first, so that when you
Yes,
broke
we'd
through
have
it,
the shredded stuff coming out.
there was the actual interior membrane holding the pieces. So kind of like a breaking car windscreen, the individual pieces would stay attached as it broke open.
Do you recall any of the actors being a little rough with that puppet, or were they all?
No, they were scared.
Playing
They were scared
well
to death
with
of
you.
it.
Yeah.
They were thankfully not like picking it up and going crazy with it.
They're handling it like you would a newborn.
Yeah.
So perfect. We've been talking small. Now let's go big. I think it's time for T-Rex. You guys, obviously, there's lots of questions about the T-Rex. T-Rex for me, when anyone asks, yeah, get in here, Beth. Anyone who worked on the Jurassic Park 1 T-Rex, you're on. Get in here. For me, anyone asks, what is the most exciting memory of your life visiting sets with your dad? And seeing that T-Rex on set was the one. What about the rest of you? Where does the T-Rex live in your hearts in that film? Speak it.
I remember it being the first dinosaur design was the T-Rex, and it was a piece to kind of depict the action of the T-Rex and the new ideas about dinosaurs and that they're active, and I think it was actually used to kind of sell Steven on, yeah, we can do this project.
Is that the
yeah,
shot?
that's the one.
Yeah.
So I had done that piece and another running piece, and that kind of sold Steven on having Stan and the guys do the show, which was great because he I remember him coming down and saying, "Who are the best dinosaur artists that you know?" And I'm like,
but you trace everything, Crash. I want someone who does it trace.
I have a lot of books I can trace from. And finally, he just came to me and said, "Oh, dude." He said, "Well, give it a shot, Crash, and see what you come up with." And I did a couple of drawings, and he showed them to Steven, and that kind of started the process. So, and I remember one of them is dated '91, so that was early on. I think.
And then it's time to build this guy. And it was an insane process. Starting Mike Tersick, you are watching. Everyone say hi to Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Mike Tersick was the art leader on the T-Rex. And he worked very hard on getting that 5th scale. Oh, well, there's actually a smaller version.
There was two
Right?
models made. There was a 1/16th scale.
1/16.
Because I think back when there was going to be Go Motion, that was going to be the size. That was going to be the one that was going to be used. And the Raptor which there's a model of one that's a 5th scale. That is the 5th scale model from Jurassic Park. It was similar in size, and that was going to be the Go Motion, and that's why that was done. The 5th scale was ILM wanted something that was larger so they could capture more of the detail in. There was scanning going on in very early stages of all that type of stuff. And so they wanted a larger model that would incorporate more detail for them to capture. And then from that, once that guy got approved, then we went into reproducing the big one.
That approval was a huge process too.
It was.
Because even with all the drawings and everything, we still didn't really have a definitive design. And I remember, I don't know if everybody was on break or on another show, but literally for months.
Christmas break.
Maybe it was Christmas, but Mike was in there by himself, and I would come in and help out. And just Stan would throw in notes. What about more eyebrows? And then so for a week he'd do eyebrows and come back. Okay, lose the eyebrows. How about this? So, it was a process.
What about pants?
Pants, chaps. So Mike was hugely instrumental in the design of that.
Sitting on it and sculpting on it for a while too.
Yeah,
it was interesting because the design was there, but it wasn't. I don't. That one, everything was riding on that T-Rex. Once that T-Rex got approved, and it became a go, it kind of unleashed a lot of things at that point. And that technology to sculpt that, I mean, was what an undertaking that was.
If you sculpted on that, raise your hand. Let's talk about it. Jinky, Grasso, come on, talk about being up on that scaffold for.
Don't forget that
Oh yeah, Dave
18
Port
feet tall.
Oh, there you go.
From the ground to the top of the nose in its neutral position, 36 feet long. So
Dave
I mean,
Beneke
like a
underneath
school bus.
thousands of pounds of clay, sculpting the belly, praying,
Literally raised the roof.
Yeah,
on the second
Draw
shot.
up your side view one of Crash's sketches, and then literally glue it to the brick wall.
the 5th scale maquette. We sliced that up and then projected the bulkhead, if you were looking at it in cross section, and then we recreated that out of wood. Alan should really talk about it because he was the one that was building a lot of.
Basically, because it's 5th scale, you need to make it 5 times larger. So we cut them, and then we put them on a photo, each cross section, each bulkhead, and you put it on a photocopier, and then you blew that up with an opaque projector 5 times. And then we cut them out of plywood, so we had a larger version of them. And then instead of 1 inch apart, we moved them 5 inches apart, and then bulkheaded them all together and chicken wired the thing. And
aluminum structure.
old time pantograph. Yeah.
And that's Richard Davison, who is no longer with us.
And the headbands.
Yeah.
That's Alan Scott.
Alan and Richard, right? Is that Richard Davison next to
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
You still have hair
I mean,
then.
this was not new technology invented. I mean, artists have been
ancient.
been doing this for years, but that's what it took at this point in
the
time.
miniature, Richard had to build basically what would become the speed rail structure large scale. He miniaturized it and we embedded it into the maquette. And so when we cut it, we knew where all the holes would be to feed through the speed rail later on. So all that had to be engineered ahead of time. Yep. And then cut it all up and then rebuild it just with mats.
And now
Simple
you
mats.
guys had that sculpting armature suspended from hooks in the ceiling, I remember.
Swing.
And I also remember it would swing a little bit. And then
Except
one
when the
day
legs were
when
attached.
there was just a little bit too much clay, we were looking up at those hooks, starting to like go, ooh, maybe we should get that onto something more strong.
Do you remember though? Do you remember when we came in one morning? We're just getting ready to start molding it, and the entire from here down, all the clay had fallen off. It just fell right off.
Yeah,
so
the belly
everybody
came off.
fixed it, and then the next day we came back in, and it fell off from here to here, and it
We
continued
had to go
on
put
each day,
butterflies
all
in
the
the
way
yeah.
to the end of the tail.
Butterfly things,
Yeah.
little wooden cross sections.
Yeah, there it is.
Hanging,
Just
so
the
that you
full-size
could,
printout.
Yeah, because it was just too much clay. And then the same thing happened with the legs, because we laid up the legs to mold them, and we came in the next day, it was ready to go, and it was just like a giant banana. Everything, this whole sculpture was just laying on the floor.
Did Dad know about this?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
He's like,
jeez.
fix it.
Let's talk about sculpting on this thing. I mean, it was epic. Nothing has ever I mean, certainly out of Stan Winston Studio, that was the largest sculpted character that ever.
Is Mike on?
Mike is watching. Mike is watching.
Oh, you can't hear him now?
No, he's watching. Type in any memories, Mike, and David Sanger will stand in as you. But let's talk about being on that thing and sculpting.
Any fun stories outside of the technical?
Yeah, you can talk fun. It doesn't have to be about epoxy.
No. Well, somehow I don't know why I was slated to block out I guess it would be the left side of the T-Rex neck in clay, and I have severe vertigo and fear of heights. So I don't know who came up with this, but it was a big scaffolding, and they were like, "Yeah, get up there. That's your area." Climbed up a couple rungs, and I was like, "Yeah, this isn't working." So I sat on an apple box, and Stan came by and he said, "What's going on?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can't get up there." He said, "Well, that's your job. You have to get up there." Didn't he make fun of you being a big muscly guy and afraid of a little height? Some kind of big sissy? And I was like, yeah. So he walked away and he came back and I was still sitting on an apple box. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, I tried. I can't get up there. He said, "Meet me at the car in 10 minutes." We got in the Porsche and we drove up to, unbeknownst to me, we drove to Magic Mountain. This is a true story. We got on the Colossus, which at the time was the biggest roller coaster in the country, I guess, and it was horrifying. I'd never been on a roller coaster in my life. I got off the roller coaster, I threw up in one of those big green garbage cans and barrels, and we laughed. Did it work? It did. Because when I got back to the shop, I climbed right up there. But the only problem is when I got to the top, I was stuck up there. So one of the guys had to come with a forklift and a pallet and let me hang on just for a green bucket. And Stan always said to me, he goes, "See that? I cured you. You're not a sissy anymore." All right, throw them out. T-Rex stories, guys. T-Rex stories. Mechanical or what? Clay too. I mean, but we can talk.
Clay story.
All right, let's do it.
I wasn't working on it. I was on the Raptor crew, but in between the shop, the main shop, and then the shop that we had to raise the roof on, that the T-Rex had to be built. Crash's friend Scott Gwidge was his name.
Gwidge.
His job was to cut clay. So he was cutting clay all day, all night, all day. That was his job. And then he actually started developing these things like these ideas like, I'm gonna get personalized plates now. I cut clay, all within 6 letters.
Didn't he sign the boxes too? I think he had like Sharpies and he started drawing.
But it was just so funny that he would just sit there and he just had the best sense of humor about it. Because that was the only way to do it. There was no other, there wasn't like a big huge vat of clay we would make. It was just going out and purchasing and.
Yeah, we'd throw the clay boxes in the oven. So we'd have like 6 boxes in there. You take them out, and then there was a shot of a few people actually chucking the clay.
Hurling the clay.
Yeah, just to try to get it. Number one, the clay's like really hot, and you're trying to get it to stick.
It's Beneke.
Yeah, Beneke. Yeah, Dave there. And so it helped. You got the clay on there.
Remember how long?
See there?
There he is. Was it, for some reason 12 or 16 weeks sticks in my head. I don't.
Yeah, it
was pretty massive. That's all the time you get on TV nowadays.
Yeah.
But
it was just
because I
Henderson.
Yeah, Rob Henderson.
Because I built the internal structure on it.
It took so many people to get that thing blocked in that. Half the shop at some point threw clay on that.
And I remember when it came time for finishing too, there was a lot of back and forth between all the artists on it and unifying the techniques so that you couldn't tell who had detailed what area.
Right.
I remember you guys made these big giant wooden mallets finally out of these big 2x4s and stuff. And you're just whacking it on there, trying to get the clay to stick.
Well, and you got to work the air bubbles out too, where you get into shaping and stuff.
There were special tools that were made, just that were like if you took the kind of sculpting tools you could buy in an art store, then you duplicated the size up huge because you had to make a wrinkle. So special wrinkle tools were cut and made so that you could pull it through, and it would do what your own little small tool would do, and just
the mother of invention that show was.
And I remember Mike walking around with a giant pair of calipers.
Making sure it all matched the maquette.
Yeah.
Hey, it does.
Now, I also remember at that point, we were shortly there before, that Stan chopped the roof out of the studio and had it raised up 3 or 4 feet.
Well, that was because it would not have fit in that building.
In the rear up position.
Yeah.
Right? You had to.
I don't think it would have comfortably fit even in its neutral position.
Right.
I think that's why we had to raise the
There's been a couple pictures with the body on the hoist in the low position, with it all the way up with the legs on, which Stan insisted upon. Stan insisted upon being able to see the entire creature together.
Yeah.
So there was never one of those things where we'll sculpt the head, then we'll add it to the body later. So
Right.
with those 17-foot tall legs, that's what it was to the top of the hips. John's right. With the head had to sweep up into the ceiling. So we had a construction company come, and they got a permit and a variance from the city, and we added a second floor to the building. We just didn't put a floor in.
Yeah, that was all during Batman Returns when we were doing all that.
You can see how high the head sticks up.
That was my,
you can see where the roof, if you're looking at the same picture we are, where the roof would have ended. But there was other techniques that were developed sculpting-wise. It was what we call the clay slurry, which enabled us to put all the little pore texture and raised dots, where you would take that clay and the heated clay, but then you mix it with an alcohol base. If I remember, and there was some that had more alcohol, less, so that you could, put these
Great bumps
and little texture that you really didn't know how to do until that.
The kind of.
Oh yeah, all of the dinosaurs it was incorporated into.
Let's talk about molding this beast. Who was involved with that? Raise your hand. What was that like, guys? Joe Reeder. Get Joe. Oh, can you? I've got to get Joe. Talk about the molds.
You know what? I didn't really work on the T-Rex. I'm going to go get Joe Reeder.
All right, go get Joe Reeder. Thank you. What an epic challenge. Again.
Well, a lot of it was driven by how big our oven was. And that drove how big a sections. It was both logical breakpoints, and then if the logical breakpoint would fit in the oven, because it wouldn't do you any good if you had this thing that didn't fit in the oven. So, and we got it with
melting clay and spraying molds.
Cleaning molds, yeah. Rock and roll, baby.
The glamour job.
So he had, Joe Reeder should step in.
Joe
here.
Reeder! We're talking about molding the T-Rex, dude. No! Sorry to bring back memories. Take my spot.
Anyway, we got a new oven on the show, a larger oven, to help us be able to fit these parts in. But it was all, figuring out and breaking down how it was going to be molded and new techniques. I don't know, Joe, if you want to talk. Dave Grasso, I know you were involved with molding.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Joe.
We're talking about molding the T-Rex, man.
Making cookies.
Well, Joe. Hey, Joe. One story comes to mind. Remember I think we molded the left side of him. And then we went to lunch. And we
were opening the mold.
No, we were walking. Well, I think they were opening it, but we were walking back. And suddenly, right when we were right by the T-Rex, the whole side of the mold dropped. And it's a big mold. I mean, you can see how big the side of them is. And it just started to come down.
With the
And
clay in it.
we all ran. And I looked back, and you were standing there going like this. Stop it. It was some magic force or something. But luckily, the scaffolding was there, and it stopped it.
Yeah,
But,
that was
I think it
scary.
huge.
The force was with you that day.
We survived.
Everything was, huge, and pun intended on this show. Molds, sculpting, every technique that it was, in a scale that was, we hadn't done anything like that before. The closest thing, and I think one of the things that got Stan the job, was that we had done the Queen Alien for Aliens for James Cameron. And that was big, but nothing like this. I think the head of her was 7 or 8 feet long. Maybe the body with the tail might have been 14 feet or so. But I think what that proved to Steven Spielberg is that these guys were capable of, puppeteering and bringing something to life like that. So I think that helped us get the job, along with many things, the artwork and all the pieces of the puzzle were lining up. But it was truly a movie of invention.
even running the skins was insane. Remember Richard Davidson? He would go around the shop with his clipboard and say, "Will you help? Will you help?"
Yeah, no,
And he had to
that's
get like
yeah.
20 people, and
Yeah.
even the pieces were so big, we'd have to turn them on their side just to get them into the foam room. And we made all these like snow shovels, you know, out of vacuum formed plastic, run the foam, just shovel it in there like crazy.
Here we go, guys. Look.
And there it is.
those big clay pours.
It's crazy.
Unbelievable
All
quantities of foam.
suffocating
Yeah.
on ammonia.
We have some T-Rex questions. Dave, shout them out.
Quite a few, starting with design. How many designs did you go through to get to the final T-Rex design?
2.
So quick.
7?
Some just basic stats, length, height, weight of this device, if anybody knows.
Well, it was 36 feet long, and in its neutral position, it was 18 feet from the bottom of the ground to the top of its head. Does anybody remember how many tons it was?
It was a 9,000-pound device perched on top of a 3,000-pound motion simulator base.
I remember when we were on
pounds
set with that, Jeff Goldblum coming up to me after it had just kind of swooped by him. And he said, "I just felt like a bus drove by me."
How many people did it take to work it?
6.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that's it. There was a core crew on set. If we're talking now, if we're moving into puppeteering, there was a telemetry device that was built that replicated the mechanical bone structure that was inside of the T-Rex, and so each person got on their limb or their head, the neck, the tail, whatever part of it they were going to puppeteer.
Evan and Charles
And
built that.
it would
Evan and
work
Charles
in
built
real time. What
I
you
think
would
I
make
built- yeah,
move,
did you?
it would do it in real time on set because it. And I guess you built that, Rich.
Yeah. I built the telemetry
there was
device,
such
yeah.
a mechanical crew on this was unbelievable. I mean, John Daw was part of it. Tim Nordella, Craig Barr, Lloyd Ball. I mean, these guys, they came from another industry, the theme park industry. So now we've got theme park ideas being woven into the aerospace, and you know, it was quite an interesting eclectic mix of things coming together to make this happen, and it really did. It worked beautifully. But we also, there was computer programming, electronics work that was pretty groundbreaking. Because one of the problems with the dinosaurs, and you know, in the old days, I think they've gotten a little better or whatever, but when you go to a theme park, you would see a dinosaur or a big attraction or creature move, and inertia always, when it came to a stop, would sort of wagga wagga, as Dan would say, or it would wiggle and kind of move. And we had to eliminate that because this thing had to perform like a real animal. So if its head whipped around, it needed to stop on a dime. So Stan, you know, got together, you know, with the whole team that was behind, you know, the electronics and the computer end of this, figuring out, you know, how are we going to, you know, get this in line and stop that from happening, because this will kill its performance. It won't look like a real animal. I mean, Alan, if you want to jump in on some
let's
of
talk
the
all
things
about
that,
the mechanics.
because I mean, this was groundbreaking stuff going on.
Accelerometers.
Yeah, what I remember is when they were tuning those accelerometers, it would shake the whole floor because that thing would just, and it would just shake the whole floor of the building when they were getting it tuned so it wouldn't do that during the performance.
Well, and this leads into Karen Winston's her comment and her question. Did you talk about the T-Rex on set? And it was never supposed to get wet from day one. There was going to be rain on set, but it was never going to rain on the T-Rex. And so everyone's like, okay, that's all right, okay. So we get there, and first day they turn on the rain, and it's pouring down all over the T-Rex. And it looks really cool, but the problem is the foam rubber skin is now absorbing all this water. And what Al was talking about with the tuning, everything had to be carefully tuned to what the weight of the creature was. So when it was finished, you know, it weighed, as Richard said, 10,000 pounds. And so it's tuned to be that. So then what happened when it got wet, suddenly it weighs a lot more, and all of that fine tuning that enabled it to stop on a dime and not wagga wagga was actually went out the window.
And
It trembled on set.
The science behind the anti-Wagga Wagga, very briefly, the way it worked was there were 3 accelerometers which measure acceleration through space and duration, measured the actual frequency or the vibration of the structure, and that was what the prototype engineer who created the circuitry was doing when, as Al said, he was shaking it to death. He was finding out
Find its limits.
He was finding out
its resonance
finding out its
frequency.
resonant structural frequencies, and he put that into a circuit. This circuit was not a printed circuit board. It was an open breadboard of small circuitry pieces, literally bridged to each other with small pieces of wire, because it was the only circuit in the world that did this job.
1992.
Now you have it in your iPhone.
Now it's in your iPhone.
Everybody has far more technology than this in their watch right now, or their Fitbit.
What were some? Sorry, Rich. Go ahead.
So then, when we got on set, the structural hysteresis, the actual frequency of the structure, is based on its weight. So as it picked up 2, 3, 4, 5, 700 pounds of water in this 3-inch thick foam latex sponge that we had glued to the entire fiberglass or carbon fiber structure, it got heavier and heavier and heavier. And the guy who built the breadboard, the original circuit, Simon, was there on set. So as it got heavier and heavier and heavier, he's watching it pick up Wagga, and he's turning these little tiny trim pots faster, 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 faster. It got heavier and heavier and heavier. Then we'd break for lunch, and the water would drain out of it. And he'd come back and he'd go lighter, 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 lighter. And he did that for 2 weeks while we shot that
In
scene.
between each shot, we had a team of people running with towels and tarps to try to dry it and keep any water off of it. Then there was a whole night shift that would come in with towels and hair dryers and.
Who was there? Who was on that night shift team?
We all did.
Yeah. Late night drying that T-Rex.
We were on the night shift before the shot.
At one point, after we got done shooting, I remember we like pushed on the belly and just went. It was like a shower.
Having a baby.
JD, you should talk about the dilating eye on that too.
Yeah, that was a pretty memorable scene.
All right, the famous dilating eye, JD.
I had the great pleasure of building that, for Stan, and that was one thing that Stan had asked me to do from the very beginning. And I said, well, I've never done anything like that before, but I'll certainly give it a try. And he said, no, you're going to be great.
Bring it in. Here's an old friend.
Oh my gosh. Wow, yes. So it's all handmade. I remember designing this thing so that we could simulate the iris opening and closing when the T-Rex basically got a flashlight shown in it. And I did a ton of research on different types of elastic membranes and things like that. And what I finally came up with, and I worked through a bunch of different setups with Richard Davison, my good friend who's now unfortunately no longer with us, but dearly missed. He was an amazing foam lab person, and I went through test after test after test after test to find just the right sort of foam latex that would go in there that would stretch open. But every time I did it, it would tear because it was pulling in a weird way and the foam just wouldn't set up or wouldn't hold up to that right strength. And then at the last minute, I came up with this idea of putting a dental rubber band on the mold and then the foam cast up around it. And what that did is the rubber band would allow the foam to stretch open evenly and wouldn't allow it to tear. And the mechanism inside would just latch onto that rubber band and just pull it open, just like you put a rubber band around your fingers and stretch it open, kind of the same sort of way.
JD, didn't we have to put that in for the shot? I don't think it was in all the time.
Right. Yeah, I had basically a solid set of eyes in the Rex for most of the movie, and then for that particular scene, Stan had me come the night before, swap out the eye for the dilating one, and then put it back in. And I remember Richard and I were on set pretty much all night, and I had the head was down and the palate was out, and I was just inside the T-Rex mouth pretty much the whole night, but once we got it in and firing up, it was pretty cool. Very, very cool. And Stan was gracious enough to, I think Mike Tursick was doing a lot of the eye puppeteering that day up until that point, and like rehearsals and stuff, and then Stan said, JD, you're here, come on over here, I want you to do this. And so I was like, wow, this is cool. And so he handed me the radio, and it was like, it was the best thing, because I actually got to play with the thing I built. So thank you, Stan.
The man who dilated the T-Rex pupil, JD, thumbs up. Mechanics, shout it out. Well, questions, and then we're going to talk more mechanics. Questions, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. So there were a lot of questions about that dilated pupil, so thanks for answering that. The other scene that has a lot of questions is the breaking of the glass on the top of the Jeep. Was that a movie effect, or did this giant creature actually shatter the glass each time?
Who wants to take that one?
The giant creature did actually break the glass, and it didn't break it, it just knocked it loose. I'm going to skip that question slightly because there's actually a better one that one begs.
Sure.
For the scene where the T-Rex nose bumps the side of the Land Cruiser, they had the special effects guys with a couple of 2x4s hanging off the back of the Land Rover, and they tried to stack the camera in such a way so it was kind of like taking a fake punch. The T-Rex nose would go by it, it would move at the same time, and they would get their shot and not damage anything. They did about 6 or 8 takes, and they, little off, not quite right, little off, not quite right. And I remember it was Charles Lutkus who was puppeteering the head at that point. He just said, watch this. And they rolled camera, and he just said, okay. And he bumped the actual side of the Land Cruiser, gave it a good push. And if you watch very carefully, it actually does tear part of the skin next to the nostril by compression.
And dented the car.
And dented the car.
Which they didn't want to do for continuity.
Lutkus!
That was what got the shot.
There's a story that somebody was once hurt by the T-Rex. Is there any truth to that? Did that happen? Did anybody get hurt?
Got bumped on the head.
Karen Mason, are you here?
She's out there.
Karen Mason is here. She got popped on the head.
But we all have our battle scars.
Yeah. Well, you were eaten by the T-Rex.
You were in it, yeah. Power
you want to swallow a little bit? Swallowed by the T-Rex?
Yeah. I had, I was working on the baby Triceratops, and that eventually got killed early in the movie, so I suddenly didn't have a dinosaur to do anymore. So I jumped from raptors and T-Rex, and I came up with the idea of the core is normally a series of rings, and I just was playing with some Slinky. I was like, why don't we make it one continuous spiral so it's one piece and it stays integral. So that became a big part of my job for months, was cutting up these spiral rings after they've been molded and formed, and you have to tape them all the way around and make sure that there was one continuous line, because we ruined a couple because I guess I didn't tape it right, and we started cutting them and they just started falling off like rings. So we got them all cut. We didn't get to finish the insert head in the shop. We had to take it to the Universal to finish it. So because I had done it, I had to crawl inside and then glue each one of those rings to the skin so that they moved. And I worked on the spine and core technology for months with Lloyd Ball and mounting it, etc. And so I went, we had to do it in a neutral pose because that's the way it was sculpted and that's the way the skins all fit. So we had to put it up in there, and then we had a phrase, put it on hold, where you basically shut off all the electronics and hold it in that one position. And it's only as safe as the electronics were, so I said to I don't know if it was Emery or who it was at the time, it's like, don't unplug, make sure no one unplugs that, because I'm going in, and I had to crawl all the way in. Basically my feet just hanging out the front of the mouth, gluing with the respirator in there, and then lo and behold, no one unplugged it, but the power in the soundstage went out. And the T-Rex just started to sing. There's 5,000 pounds of pressure, and I'm in there, and it's like, oh my God, I see all just shearing metal. Because I just pulled all my fingers and arms in so I didn't get caught, and it just like sank down into its pose. And then the other guys, I wish I had the thought to I had a blood bag or scream. I was really more concerned about my arms and legs. So the guys just pulled open the mouth and I dropped out. But
the only man to actually be swallowed by a T-Rex, Alan Scott.
There you go.
Any other final mechanical stuff? We got Kim here. We got Kim Derry here.
A couple of other quick questions from our watchers here.
Yes, we can do a watcher question, then Kim. You saved the T-Rex one night. We can talk about that too. Go ahead.
So they want to know just were the issues with size? How do you figure out how much clay, how much latex? What determines that when you're doing something this size that's never been done before?
A lot of math.
A lot of math.
A lot of math, and
Multiply by
seat of the
5.
pants guesswork based on other things that you've done. There's really no exact science to it.
When you run out, you get more.
Yeah.
You get Pat Todd. Pat.
I mean, it was difficult.
On set, how long was the reset between takes on set? Was it a day? Was it hours?
Reset, you mean move it somewhere? That would be a big deal.
Overnight.
I mean, speaking of it was an overnight thing. One of the fun stories was us all showing up at 2 o'clock in the morning at Stan's shop with this enormous tractor trailer and crane there, loading it onto this big flatbed, and they had a very special route for it to go so it would fit under all the bridges and all that. But they were supposed to, have this path cleared and, all this good stuff. So it took us, 4 hours, 3 hours to load this thing. And we needed to get it out and on the road before rush hour started because it would cause quite a stir. It was covered the best we could. But the funny thing is, nobody told the guy at Universal, the gate, that there was, or actually it was Warner Brothers, that a T-Rex was showing up around 6 a.m. And that caused quite a stir. I'm on the phone trying to get Kathy Kennedy and all the producers to, I think you got to let this guy know he's supposed to be there. Let him in, And anyway, it finally got on stage. But to move this, to set it up, was enormous deal. Huge crane. I don't know what the weight of that crane was. Champion crane. All I
18
remember.
pounds, Richard? 18 pounds strength?
A little bigger.
And once it was in place on stage, it didn't move.
No, once it got planted in stage, it stayed there. On the subsequent movies, we moved it a little bit more, but on this one, on the first one, it pretty much stayed on stage 16 the whole time. Now, we might have pitched it, moved it. Yeah, we would move its position.
It would move to another
Yeah,
position.
but within that stage. But inside, there was big eye bolts, I'm talking big serious things that you'd lash that, pick it up and move it around.
No, we had on air bearings. We had
Airbags
3
as
air
well.
bearings on
Yeah.
it that would move it around.
Once
the
it
stage.
got in the stage,
Once
but
it was
getting
on the
it to the
stage,
stage,
right.
it was the whole crane operation. It
So,
was huge for everything on this movie.
Total time from start of fabrication to delivery on set?
Start of design to delivery?
No, from fabrication.
So,
well, am I right in remembering it was somewhere between 12 and 16 weeks of sculpture? I mean, maybe it's 12. It must have taken another month to mold it.
Mechanics, what do you recall for the...
I think it was like a year.
Yeah.
I think it was like a full year.
Close to a year with mechanics and everything.
Yeah.
A lifetime.
A lifetime. There's
a lifetime in the movie business, honestly.
There's some BTS documentaries and a script that says there was a scene where the T-Rex licks Tim in the tour car. Was that ever filmed? As far as you know?
No. I think we made it.
I think that was Dr. Grant licks Tim. I don't know.
I don't know what movie Matt saw.
I remember seeing that.
A couple of quick questions.
There was a tongue made that was supposed to.
Was it tongue in the second movie?
I think it was the second movie.
There was one in the waterfall.
T-Rex tongues are coming up in our next segment.
Three more quick questions.
Go ahead.
Was there a nickname for the T-Rex?
Timmy, was it? No, Todd? Todd the T-Rex?
No nickname. What happens to the animatronics when you're done shooting?
Well, the animatronics of this T-Rex a lot of it made its way into the next film. So this one made it to the second one, and I believe a lot of its core structure made it to the third film. So it was reused in.
The skins didn't.
The skins did not make it. No.
Well,
Interesting story about the skins. We didn't really take into account how much shrinkage we were going to get out of running something that big and thick. So there was areas when we went to put the thing together where we just had a good foot or more gap. So then we would have to run another section of the skin and piece it in there and foam patch it together to make it work, which it did. But that was one of those surprises in the middle of it all.
Well, mechanically speaking, I remember we went through the sheer terror and in trial by fire of building all these creatures for the first time, of like way beyond all our capabilities. But we came together as a really good team. But when you build all that stuff and you get to the end and you look back on it, you go, boy, I wish I could have done this better or whatever. And then when having the opportunity to do it again, I remember we all talked about that. We're like, oh man, we immediately looked at all the things we'd love to improve on. So the idea that we could take the Velociraptor armature or the Rex armature or any of the other characters and take another look at them was amazing. It was a great opportunity because we really improved on a lot of stuff.
Craig, I haven't heard a word out of you. Do you want to talk about
He wants to reminisce about the Raptors.
Yes. We should go back to Raptors real quick while you're here. Is there a
Raptor story you want to tell?
Yeah.
Well, actually, there was the whole concept about how we came across the T-Rex mechanics was we were all racking our brains out. We were going to Universal Studios and looking at the King Kong there and at the Five Goes West ride that was on a seesaw thing. We went to equipment rentals and we looked at backhoes and cranes and all that stuff. And just by some complete accident, I was down in Anaheim at a helicopter exposition and I saw this motion base. I said, how much weight can you put on that thing? 9,000 pounds. We come back and I told Stan and everybody was like, yeah, that's the way we're going to do it. But the nice thing was that the people at the flight simulator company, they had already figured out all these things that we hadn't even thought of at that time, like pushing around all this hydraulic fluid causes it to get really hot, and that causes the fluid to expand. And then at that point, all the mechanics become really spongy. So half the problem was just keeping the fluid cooled down. So it was all this stuff that they brought with them. But it was certainly a fun ride.
And all those pumps and machinery to run these things, it was enormous. I mean,
2 100 power pumps working in tandem.
100 horsepower? 100 horsepower each, and
Yes.
I think by the time we got to the Spinosaur, we like tripled that or whatever. That's
And also,
later.
also around that time too, Craig, I remember Bob Gurr, the legendary Imagineer from Disney, came in and consulted with us too, and gave us some amazing insight and some thoughts on those robust type of theme park armatures.
Well, Kim, you should talk too because your expertise in welding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to fix it, the T-Rex.
Yeah.
First thing they did was break it. They smashed it. They brought it on set. I guess when you unplug it and replug it back in, it doesn't know where zero is. So when they plugged it in, it just smashed into the floor. And then it's days to fix it if you take it back to the shop.
Right.
So I had to, these guys got knives and cut the tongue open. I got up under there and told them to go to all the hair and makeup girls and get all the mirrors that they had so I could weld with a mirror to fix that thing because the whole jaw was bent sideways and over. I had to bring it back and then brace it all up where it wouldn't do it again. And do that with mirrors and stuff. But I welded at nuclear reactors for years before I did the movie business stuff. So I knew how to weld with a mirror.
Wow. Which was harder?
Which is really hard to do, welding with a mirror. You had to bend the welding rod down, under, and then back up to where I was welding. And put the mirror under here and do it like that. And somewhere they used to have a picture of me with my feet hanging out the mouth while I'm welding. I remember somebody showed me that picture one day.
Now, Brian, didn't you weld on that big old robot?
Yes, I did.
Is it your fault that it broke?
No, it wasn't. Somebody else.
What is your recollection of it? And then we're going to have to wrap this up and move into Jurassic Park 2. We have 3 more films to talk about. Brian.
That was the first film that I got to weld on, and Stan actually sent me to welding school. I'd leave at the shop 2-3 times a week, about an hour and a half early, and go to welding school and got certified. to help weld on it with Grande and a couple other guys.
Armando
Gonzalez. And he was teaching me how to weld during the show. So when I go to welding class, the welding instructor was like, "Well, what are you doing here? You could weld. Why are you here?" And I'm like, "Well, I gotta get certified to have my cert for everything on that."
You got to think, this thing's going on to the movie set. It's got to be safe.
Yep.
It weighs 9,000 pounds. There's no joke. The safety on set, someone was saying, did someone get hurt? Their precautions were it was a big deal.
We had red lights going when you had it on and everything.
They would get roped off when it wasn't working. All the actors, it was explained to them, this thing could hurt you, if it hits you, because it's made of steel.
Didn't we put a memo out that said this is as lethal as a real dinosaur? Stay away.
I think there was something like that.
At the tip of the nose, we could create 2.2 Gs.
Wow.
Whipping it around.
So the comment of feeling like a bus just drove by
when
you.
When we had the big Northridge earthquake, third Northridge earthquake was 1.8 Gs. That through the whole thing was right around there, and that's to give you a point of the shaking and the motion of it, everything.
I remember being on set the first day. The first AD had a safety meeting and called everybody in to discuss the safety of working around it. And he said, "I want everybody to look up the T-Rex, and when you look at it, you see a helicopter. This is to be given all of the respect and all of the clearance as far as getting physically close to it as spinning helicopter blades. That's how much respect I want you to give this device, because it is dangerous and it can hurt you."
Stan was very nervous. I remember that.
I don't want my puppet to kill anyone.
Yeah, it all worked out.
The first victim of the T-Rex was a goat. You all know that. We're going to come to a question, Dave, in a second. The goat was the first victim. And one of my father's dearest friends, and my second father, Lance Anderson, made that goat. So let's hear about that goat, Lance. The first victim of the T-Rex.
Yeah. Well, Stan contacted me, and we were talking, and he said, "You want to be a part of Jurassic Park?" Yeah, what do you got?
Got a goat.
He literally threw me a bone. So I had to make a bunch of bones and limbs of the goat and stuff, and body parts. And when I bit it, there was something there. I don't know, maybe everybody knows about it, but there was supposed to be a cow or something on a chain. And
For the raptor. It's fed down
Did
in
that
the
ever happen?
raptor cage.
The raptor, yeah.
The raptor.
He didn't give you that bone. You just got to do the goat.
I didn't get that, but
There
I
was-
did it. It must have been too high. So I made the goat, and I was on the set a couple of days with all the body parts and the goat.
It was tricky getting the goat. We had to coordinate to get that goat to pass through the thing's mouth and then go down inside.
Yeah, I was actually on the rope at the bottom of it.
Yeah.
We had to feed a tube all the way up through it, and then down to the bottom of the motion base. And then the goat was attached to a rope, and then on the right cue, the T-Rex came down. You sucked the rope into it, and then as it came up, you had to pull it all the way down its throat. And that's where I was down underneath in the rain, underneath that 10,000-pound thing. It's like, yee! Just got to swallow it.
Well, we're going to take a final. Thank you so much for being. By the way, I called Lance a few hours ago. He said, "I'm not coming. I just made the goat." I said, "Nonsense. You're getting over here."
There's been a lot of questions online about the goat, so I'm glad you hit that. That was a lot of interest about the goat.
We didn't talk about, and there's the classic shot of the foot coming down into
Yeah.
the mud.
That was a great
And
shot.
Richard. It's Richard. You were involved with that, were you?
Yeah, that was almost singularly my mechanical design, based on the. I also used an ostrich and X-rays of an ostrich foot in walking poses to create the motion.
That became such an iconic shot.
Yeah.
And that was done with this big mechanical leg.
Oh, there's Richard's drawing right there.
There it
There's
is.
a pair of walking legs as well, was there not?
Yeah, there were 2 feet with a full belly. Then there was meant to be a scene in the film where they were supposed to go walking along, and eventually CG took that shot because of constraints on set. We literally ran out of time to shoot it.
The walking ones right there.
But for the scene where the camera is looking through the legs and the nostrils blow the hat off Sam Neill, that was through the insert legs, and the iconic stepping into the mud.
Didn't you have to make little gripper spikes?
Oh,
Screw. I remember you said you had to make little
we were
cleat
originally going to
spikes.
put cleats on the bottom, but actually we had I put that through an engineering phase, and he said that if you constrain a structure that strong at the bottom and at the top, something in between will break. So we decided to allow the feet to skate if they wanted to, so that it wouldn't destroy the structure.
And they did. They self-walked.
Did Michael Crichton ever visit the set?
Yeah, I don't know about the set, but he came to the shop.
Yes.
He was on set.
He was on set too. Well, I remember when he came to the shop, it was a pretty big deal. You know, we were all excited for him to come, and he was very excited to see what was going on. It was a neat moment.
And then were you guys involved at all with the rides, any of the rides in any of the theme parks? Is that totally different stuff?
It was our molds.
Same molds.
Yeah, and Shane and I, Shane's not here right now, but we were called down to take a look at it before it opened because they wanted the guys that painted and worked on the dinosaurs to, give them I don't know, critique's the right word, but just to, give them direction, make sure that they were staying true to what was in the film. But other than that, no.
All right, that wraps up T-Rex questions, guys.
Before you guys,
go ahead, Alan.
they're not here. Tim Nordella,
Yep.
Lloyd Bull, Larry Bull.
Tim's online with us.
Yeah.
Tim's
Oh,
watching.
online?
Tim's watching
Tim Nordella's
online.
watching?
Absolutely.
Those guys, it was really an engineering feat. It was remarkable.
And
Like,
Simon,
couldn't
too,
have done Simon.
Evan
Weber.
Brainerd.
Evan Brainerd, Chuck DeLo.
Yeah, Evan is also watching.
Evan's online as well. Both Evan and Tim have been chiming in.
And those guys were
Couldn't
really
have been done
responsible for
without
the
those guys.
mechanics and the hydraulics, and really made it work. Everyone right there.
Yeah.
Craig Barr.
Yeah.
So guys, unfortunately, I know we could talk about Jurassic Park all night, but we got 3 more films to cover, so we are going to call it on JP. I know we could talk for hours. Let's do something again in the future where we can dive even deeper, but we have to move on. From listening to this whole JP hour and change, it sounds like it was a bunch of people who didn't really know what they were doing. Being thrown the most impossible task in movie making history and coming up to the challenge. That's sort of the recurring theme here. And it got easier as the movies went on, and we will talk about all of those when we come back. Put your hands together for yourselves. We're going to take about a 10-minute break. When we come back, we're going to start talking about Jurassic Park 2. We're going to start with the herbivores. We will see you soon at Jurassic Party.